Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smashbox TV's podcast 441. Yeah, that's what comes after 440. It's 441. I am your normal host, John Van Ders, and I am joined tonight by a new co-host. We're not getting rid of the old guy yet, but he is over in Thailand. Terry Miller notified me earlier today that he was not going to be able to join us because he's, I don't know, chasing sunsets is what I think I saw on his socials a couple hours ago. But we're here with Dustin Mouret. Dustin, welcome to the show.
I know I made it, man. I was in the chat, for 2 years, and I'm the guy who made it. So
That's right.
Happy to be here.
Every once in a while, I just pluck someone out of the chat, and they're my new co-host. That's how this works. So sorry, Terry. We're gonna get rid of you, and we're gonna pick up Dust. Actually, this week, Dustin, I think I saw you do your own YouTube thing. Is that right? Did I see? I know you were doing some work. For those of you that don't know, Dustin comes from an esports background. I think you've done some CSGO, some Valorant streaming, probably other first-person shooters that I don't even know. I barely know those two, to be honest. but you come to us from the esports background. You jumped in a couple years ago and chatted with us, and now you've been doing some things with the Pro Tour and whatnot. Kind of fill us in on what's going on with you.
Yeah, so you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I, have an esports background, been involved in esports for, I think, over 10 years at this point, mostly as a commentator, but I've done other roles within the space. I think most people in esports eventually wind up doing a little bit of everything. And as you said, I started with the Counter-Strike franchise, and then Counter-Strike Global Offensive is the most recent version of that game, which came out in 2012. And so I worked on that game for ever since it came out, basically. But I kind of pivoted into Valorant about 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm doing that now. Actually, we just started the new season for Valorant. The actual Riot League, Riot Games, of course, being the company that made the game. Some people made League of Legends, if you're familiar with that. So yeah, we actually just got started last week. So still involved in the esports space, but yeah, I got involved with some disc golf stuff last year. I hosted a show called The Scramble that was on the Disc Golf Network. It was like a tournament recap show that I did the scripting and voiceover work for. Unfortunately, that got put on hiatus for this next year, so not sure what's going to happen going forward there. And I also worked for Gatekeeper last year. I did the MPO feature and chase card coverage with Gatekeeper for pretty much the entire year last year. So yeah, was able to kind of get into disc golf pretty quickly. Actually, I was kind of surprised that I was able to get involved with so much stuff so fast, and I'm just hoping to keep doing so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, with media, everybody in this arena is looking for talent. Always. I mean, whether it's especially reliable talent, because if you know anything about disc golfers, they're not always the most reliable people. They're very busy. They're on the road. They don't necessarily always have great internet connections and things like that. So sometimes it can be difficult to get someone who's reliable, who knows, as I joked with you on the way in, has a good microphone, a steady camera, and things like that. Those are surprisingly valuable on the road. So it was nice to see. It's always nice to hear a new voice come into the sport. And so now you are, if I recall, I think I saw some posts today that you did a new disc golf video. What is, I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. What's the concept on this?
So yeah, basically when I got into disc golf a few years ago as a hobby, I also started a YouTube channel just for the heck of it, because why not? And a lot of the content on my channel is just mostly me playing, whether it be like fun rounds or practice rounds or tournament rounds even. But I also started getting involved elsewhere. Like I'm a part of that new debate night show that's kind of like an around the horn style thing, doing that with the Foundation crew. And I also just kind of decided to do something similar to what Terry did with that drop zone thing that he's doing on his YouTube channel, which is where I just kind of sit down and talk about disc golf for a little bit, just talking head, going through things, giving my thoughts. If people like it, cool. And just see how it goes. Basically, I'm just trying to do everything that I can, to get involved in the space and, just kind of take those steps. And so that thing is just kind of like the next thing I'm trying, to see how it goes.
No, that's great. If you've got a unique voice, I think that people will show up at some point. I think, a lot of people, I've watched a lot of things in general, YouTube businesses and things like that. And there's one side of the atmosphere that kind of says, hey, make sure reliable and that's kind of what we have always done for the longest time. Every week, same time, same spot, get something out there. And then there's the other people that are just as successful that say, you know what, quality, It doesn't matter about quantity. Make sure you hit your quality. It can be every 2 weeks. It could be every 3 weeks, as long as your audience kind of has a general idea and the stuff that you're putting out is of high quality. The people they'll sub, they'll join, you'll get that. So I think that there's obviously valid points either way, depending on how you want to attack it. But in general, I believe that if you have a unique voice and a good solid take, that the people will end up showing up for whatever you put. It seems like that there's almost an insatiable craving for disc golf, whether it's talking heads or event coverage. As long as there's a name that they can recognize or someone that they can talk about, people will show up.
Yeah, I think for me, like right now, it's about building credibility within the disc golf space, right? Because while I have lots of experience, a lot of that is in an area that most people in disc golf are not familiar with at all. There is some crossover that I've found with, randomly people from esports, fall in disc golf or vice versa, but it's pretty rare. And so I think that's like the biggest thing is just trying to get my foot in the door, establish myself, let people know that I'm not just, kind of blowing through the wind, that this is something that I'm actually really passionate about and want to be involved with long term. It's not like I'm just trying to like jump in because, it's a hot commodity after COVID and all that jazz. Like, no, this is something that I truly fell in love with. And I just want to be able to take whatever skills and experience that I have and hopefully bring it to the table of disc golf and help out in some way, just be a part of it, because that's the dream, right? You find something you love and you want to work in that thing. And I think that's what we're all chasing after in the end, right?
And then you grow to hate it. It's awesome.
I haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully no time soon.
Yeah, I'm like 25. Don't worry, you'll get there. You'll get there. No, no. Honestly, you're right. Find something, and that's obviously what we did here. It's funny because I'm on the side right now. Obviously, I've got a lot of different disc golf fires in the irons in the fire. That's the word I'm looking for. Irons in the fire, not fires in your iron, but that would be different. That's a household issue if you've got a fire on your iron. But so I'm building out a website for Skip Ace for the fantasy disc golf stuff. So, obviously we have the actual app that works and it's great, but I want to build up more of a front end. We've had some people kind of say, hey, I'd love to, rather than just showing up and signing in, I want a little more information. So I'm kind of building out a little bit website, a history. I was going through the history of Skip Ace and how long I've been doing it for. And I was thinking like, yeah, like I've been doing this a long time. I remember literally sitting in my senior year of college, with a big red notebook and a piece of blank paper, just sketching out how online fantasy disc golf would work in 2001. And
wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's long time. And so just kind of doing that out. And then I went to the Wayback Machine and I looked up, I used to have the domain fantasydg.com, which now UDisc owns of all people. It got passed around.
Man.
It got passed around a little bit. I had that from like 2002 to 2014 or something like that. I think I let it expire in 2014 because I was done with the fantasy sports at that point. I had a family and we were getting into the media business, and it just wasn't going to be anything I had time with. Somebody else immediately picked it up, grabbed it, built a website. It lasted less than a year and it failed. And I think they maybe let it expire, and then Innova picked up the website domain, and then I think Innova ended up selling it to UDisc, and now UDisc has one of my old domains. The other old domain that I had was Disc Golf Stream, where I was looking at that, and it was going to be, back in the day, I think it was 2010, it was going to be the Netflix of disc golf videos, before YouTube was a thing. Like, wow. I had burnt off all these DVDs from Maple Hill, and I had a whole collection of them, and I was ready to go live with it. And then YouTube came out, and I kind of lost a little bit of passion. I'm like, oh, people can just upload these now for free. Why would anyone pay to watch these?
You're a little bit ahead. You're a little bit ahead of the game.
I was a little bit ahead, but that's okay. Better to be ahead. Sure. And then, at least I didn't really spend any money on it. It was more time of anything. So, and that was Disc Golf Stream, which is now run by the European Pro Tour. They took that domain after I let that expire, and definitely. So the rule is, kids, if you ever register a domain, don't ever let it expire. Never. Just keep them forever. They're super cheap. But it's amazing how long, when you're in the sport for this long, things can get old. But we're getting close to the season starting, though. And this is the exciting time of year. It's kind of the dead zone of news. Other than a few random tournaments here and there, everybody's getting ready for what's going to be the All-Star event and the Disc Golf Convention, or whatever they're calling it. And after that, there's a week or two, then we get the season. We get Las Vegas Challenge, which I'm actually, I wasn't going to be doing much directing this year, but working with one of the other guys who now is doing a lot of directing, he does a side gig as a cameraman for the Blazers, the Portland Trail Blazers, basketball team, obviously. And so he's busy he asked me, hey, do you think you could cover? I was like, for sure. So I'll actually be doing a little bit more early in the season, a lot more in the end of the season. And in the prime summer months, I'm doing nothing, which is great because I'm going to play a lot of disc golf this summer. That's my goal.
Nice.
Is just to actually play and ignore.
Are you trying to make a comeback to the tour? Like, is that?
Oh God,
is
not the
JVD on his
not
way?
the pro tour. Maybe the Wisconsin tour. I'm gonna try to.
Why not
that
you're gonna go to the Masters tour or something? The Cali McMahon one?
Yeah, I don't believe it's coming to our area. I'll have to take a look to see what's going on with the Masters tour. But my goal
you can just be one of the other 50 people who can play in that Facebook group. Then
I'm not. I avoid most. I'm trying to get rid of a lot of Facebook in my life in general, but
it's a good move.
It is social media in general, but I do still have the Skip Ace thing out there that I'm literally this morning. So I woke up and like most people, I get up, shower, sit at breakfast, and I was scrolling through Facebook on my phone, and I think I counted 15 straight ads.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
Just 15. I was like, okay, I'm done. Like just. I shut her down.
If it wasn't for disc golf, I wouldn't have Facebook.
That's exactly kind of how I feel right now, too. If it weren't for
like,
disc golf, I wouldn't have.
It's that bad.
I always want everyone just started Discord.
Messenger's okay. I mean, that's kind of nice if you don't have someone's phone number, get in touch with somebody.
It is.
Yeah,
it's a good way.
It is just ads.
It's a great way to communicate. It's just a loaded ads. But we're going to talk a little bit about what went on this past weekend. We were talking about some disc golf coverage, and for those of you in the know, we saw on Sunday night the Disc Golf Pro Tour had an ESPN2 video, so to speak. Did you get a chance to watch that, Dust?
Very brief glimpses of it. Like I didn't actually get to like really strap in for the whole thing. But certainly I was kind of like watching the chatter about it, and this is like the third time I think it's been on ESPN, and the fourth time it's been on television, I think, in the last, year and a half or something like that?
Yeah, something around there.
Yeah, because I think CBS or one other network had DDO one year, and then, we've had ESPN a couple of times now. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly neat. Like, I'm kind of torn on it, to be honest. But I'll let you kind of take over before I give any opinions.
I didn't watch it. I'm not going to lie. And I think that's part of it. I mean, I don't have, first of all, I don't have cable. So to watch it in general would be a slight pain. And I could find it. There are methods. I know people. I've got connections. The last video, whatever special they had on ESPN, I talked to one of the guys at the Pro Tour, and they sent us a private link for it so we could kind of stream it on our side just to view it. But I'm not going to lie that I kind of ignored it. And I kind of feel like at this point, I'm a little over it. I'm a little over disc golf on ESPN. And I don't know. I'm involved with the live aspect of the Pro Tour. I say this a lot. I'm not involved with any sort of post-production. I kind of bucket this in a little bit with post-production stuff. I don't know what the Pro Tour's goal is with these things other than maybe a little bit of exposure. But for a person who consumes a lot of disc golf in general, it just doesn't interest me anymore. Like I feel like until we can get live on ESPN or ESPN2, probably ESPN2, let's be honest. Maybe ESPN Plus. I don't know.
Exactly. That's the ticket right there. And that's exactly what I was about to say, was that I think, right now, us being on ESPN2 like we were this past Sunday, as long as it didn't cost them anything either way, then fair enough. Like, why not? Like, maybe it exposes us to a new audience. Maybe some people just happen to flip through, catch it. Oh, what's this? Disc golf? What's that? And, like, maybe you grab some new eyeballs that way. That's, like, the one benefit I could think of. But just as you said earlier, cable television's going by the wayside. The future is live streaming. The future is these apps and these different, like, subscription services, whether that be a Hulu or a Netflix or an ESPN Plus, so on and so forth. That's the real future, though, for disc golf in ESPN's ecosystem, is to maybe one day have that partnership with ESPN Plus where that's where it's being streamed instead of being streamed on the disc golf network, for example. Like maybe there's some partnership there or something. I think that's the future. Like if it was me, I wouldn't invest a single dollar in getting disc golf on ESPN if I'm the disc golf pro tour. I think it's a waste of money in my opinion. Like I was shocked because wasn't it Dynamic and a bunch of companies came together and paid CBS for that spot?
Yeah,
like,
it was.
I thought that
it
was bonkers.
I think it was six figures, close to
That's
six figures
bonkers.
to get. And I don't know if that included all the production and everything, but yes, that the CBS deal was a whole separate thing that was really unique and different.
And I hope we never see it again, honestly, because I just don't think it's worth it.
I mean, there's
maybe the first couple of times it was kind of neat for exposure, but like now the future is live streaming. I think that should be the focus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. Again, it all depends on what it's costing. I mean, clearly it's not free because they have to put together these pieces. Ray on the board is saying how a lot of it looked like it was the on-tour footage that they kind of cut together and maybe created an end of year and then the DGPT wrap up at the championship. So if you're not paying a ton, because if this is already done, you're not paying a ton to get it done. And honestly, this is not a bad week. If you're going to pick a weekend, this isn't a bad weekend. You had a little bit of basketball, and you're in the dead zone for NFL. So, you know, it's Pro Bowl weekend, which nobody cares about. Even the players that are in the Pro Bowl don't care about it. I think I saw a quote by Josh Jacobs, the running back for the Raiders, who basically said, "This is effing stupid." Just the way they're handling the Pro Bowl now. It's a skills challenge. But so this is a good weekend to do it if you're going to do something like that because you got nothing going on. But I agree that if the cost is too much, then I think that it's a bad investment. If you're not paying anything and you already have most of the footage, then I don't mind it.
Sure.
But again, it's not for us. You know, you're looking to probably pick up the casuals, maybe either your casual disc golfer who happens to browse upon it, or just your non-disc golfer who kind of peeks in and was like, "What the heck is this?" Like, "Oh, these guys throwing frisbees in the woods. All right, let me watch this." And maybe they get a little surprised. Maybe they follow it. You hear the same thing about when people stumble upon a Jomez video that don't know anything about disc golf. And it can be a compelling product.
I do wonder if it like adds maybe a bit of legitimacy to like your deck when you're pitching a sponsor. Like, hey, look, we were on ESPN. Like maybe there's some type of behind the scenes benefit in that regard, maybe. But I'm not like some type of business guru, so I wouldn't really know. But like you said, I think it's one of the things where if it's low cost, if it's like not too much effort, then yeah, certainly. But like TV's not the future of disc golf, and I don't think that anyone should ever really have that idea in their head. Like the future is where we're already headed, you know, which is this, you know, live streaming service. Now, how that evolves over time is a completely different story. Who knows, right?
Exactly. And for someone like Barbasol, maybe, who was the sponsor of the Pro Tour finale, this could be really nice for them in the future because their name is all over it. They didn't have to pay anything extra to have it done, so maybe you can sell that as a bonus ad. Now, unless they knew about this, which they probably did ahead of time, this might have been part of the sell for the finale to Barbasol. I don't know if it's a chicken and egg thing. Which one came first? You know, do you sell it to Barbasol saying that it's going to be on ESPN2, or do you get it on, or do you get them for the championship and then bonus the ESPN2 coverage? So, like I said, you and I both agree at some point. I mean, we all know live is the future. That's the way it's going. That's the way it's going to be. It's just a matter of whether or not we're going to get anything with ESPN in the next. I mean, it's kind of funny because I know the production inside and out for live, and I feel like we do a really great job for the Disc Golf Network. I don't know if we would do a great job for ESPN2 or Plus. That's a whole new beast of things that you need to actually think about, because there's all sorts of different requirements when you go to a TV streaming system versus just the online stuff. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. So
I think like what's more than likely is some type of partnership in the future with a subscription service like an ESPN Plus type model, where maybe it's somehow simulcasted, or maybe some type of deal gets struck on certain events, maybe being on ESPN Plus or something like that. Like I think that is the more likely long-term partnership if there were to ever be one between the Pro Tour and ESPN. But again, you know, it's one of those things where it's not like there's nothing wrong with it. Like, you know, if people thought it was cool and they enjoyed it, and if it somehow did bring a couple of new eyes to the sport and it didn't cost much, then yeah, cool beans. But I'm more interested in seeing the future of live and where that's headed. Whether that continues to be a Disc Golf Network exclusive, whether that continues to be a subscription service, or whether there's a movement in a different direction. Like, those are the things I'm more interested in seeing evolve in disc golf personally.
Side note to this, talking about your history with commentating stuff. Have you ever done commentating stream that's been on a major cable outlet?
Yes.
Have you? Where?
So I did E-League, which was on TBS, and that was in 2016 for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. It aired, I think, for 2 seasons. I was only a part of the first one. And then I think there was like a couple of other like little one-offs that happened outside of like actual seasons. But that never really, I think, went the way that TBS hoped, because obviously like they weren't hitting the viewership numbers that maybe they thought they were going to get, because again, it's the same situation with esports. Is people are used to watching that online, live stream on Twitch or YouTube or whatever that case may be. And so to try to ask that audience to migrate and watch it live on TBS is a really tough sell for the mass audience that actually does really care about it. And what they wound up doing was that it was almost simulcasted, where they had the full broadcast on TBS, but you could actually still watch the match, just the bare bones like gameplay and commentary, but you wouldn't see like all of like the cool graphics or like the cool side content or any of that stuff. That was all on TBS on TV, but you could still watch the match on Twitch. And so that's kind of how they got around it, where they could still kind of keep the core audience happy, but still have a product that was unique to the television experience. And I'm not sure whatever really happened with that, to be honest with you, but clearly it wasn't successful enough because it no longer exists. And again, I think it's just the same thing. Like the future is live streaming. It's not to be on TV. And I think for esports wise, that only would have worked if there was some type of TBS like online streaming service or something like that, I think. But the problem you have with esports, which is very different than disc golf, is that everything's free, right? And so if you're a viewer and you ain't getting to watch it for free, you probably ain't watching, because that's what you're used to.
Yeah, it's a total culture difference in that disc golf. I mean, we never live was never free. Post-production has almost always been free, depending on the event. And you go back through way back to the early 2010s, and some of the post-production was paid, but that's like a whole different, I consider that a whole separate, web 1.0 or 2.0 pre-YouTube kind of, where I don't really count that. But once YouTube came into effect, post-production's always been free. So the fact that, when DGN wanted to start charging for even live was free for the longest, for a little while. And now that the Disc Golf Network has kind of pushed the culture of disc golf live into a paid model, it's different. And I don't know what it would. I was trying to think of something while you were talking about how that could work for esports. You would have to have almost like a new, we'll take like the Valorant League, something really big, and they'd have to start out that way. It would have to be a popular hit, a crazy popular game immediately to go right into that, like a League of Legends that wanted to do something pay-per-view. And I can't imagine.
There were some attempts, I know, with like the Overwatch League, as well as a couple of other things where you would get like the bare bones stream for free, as you would normally would for any esports tournament, whether that be on Twitch or YouTube or whatever the case may be. But then you would pay like a monthly subscription to get like kind of like almost bonus features. Like you would get to get like maybe additional stats and like other assets at your disposal, or you could play like kind of like armchair producer, where you could kind of control like what camera you watched as opposed to like whatever the mainstream was showing. So they would try to do like these pay-per-view models where all of it was like bonus stuff. Like it wasn't the core product. It was all like additional features that maybe you think would be cool. Maybe like in-game cosmetics, or like a special badge in your chat, in the chat room next to your name, or those sorts of things have been the attempt in esports as far as pay-per-view goes. But it's kind of a funny story that esports and disc golf are on the opposing side, right? Where esports is basically a free to watch model and disc golf is a pay to watch model, and both clearly have their pros and cons. And obviously the pro over on our side of things is, well, there's no barrier to entry, and so the viewership can be really high. But then the problem becomes, well, how do you monetize that? Because people aren't paying you anything. And so that becomes a very tricky scenario. On the other hand, with disc golf, you're getting guaranteed money from the people who do subscribe, but how many more people would watch if it was free? Is it like a build it and they will come? Are you going to rely on sponsorship and advertising dollars? Are you relying on consumer dollars from your customers, your audience? Like it's a really murky water situation trying to figure out like what the right solution is there. And esports is struggling right now. Like it's very obvious that people are struggling to make money. I think a lot of esports right now is actually afloat due to like venture capital and like huge valuations. And it'll actually be interesting to see how esports survives long term once some of those come back to roost and want to return on their investment.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, for a lot of people that follow any sort of business right now, things, the stock market is doing that's very similar thing with a lot of the tech industry. It's no longer how much can you grow, it's how much can you show. That's I want to see bottom lines. I want to see this, which is why a lot of stocks right now are kind of are dipping. So if esports is in that same position where at some point they're going to need to start showing a profit, you're either going to have to get more sponsors or find a way to monetize the person, which is what disc golf is doing. If that's the argument. Why a lot of people say, how come you charge? Think of all the people you'd get if it were free. And you're right. You might get another 20-30% people to watch if it were free, but then you need to monetize outside. And that's a lot. That's really difficult, especially right now, with the way the economy is. It's really difficult to monetize outside of
the sponsorship and advertising dollars would have to be there to supplement the loss you're going to take by losing all your paid subscribers. And maybe there is a halfway system at some point for the Disc Golf Pro Tour where maybe you do still keep a paid subscription service, and those people get access to more stuff than the people who watch for free. I mean, you're kind of already seeing that, right? Where y'all show the final round for free on YouTube, right? And so that is kind of that halfway, and that's the most important round anyway. That's what most people are like wanting to truly watch. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves over time, because I think right now disc golf's in a place where I think if you got rid of the subscription model, the viewer base isn't high enough to get that all back on a sponsorship end, at least right now. Now whether that changes over time, who knows? But I think you'd be hard pressed to completely change your financial model like just that quickly, that rapidly, and think that it would be successful. You'd be taking a hit.
Yeah, we're going to see what the next couple of years comes and shows us. That's for certain, because I think you're right. I think that maybe the hybrid model where you get like the first 3 rounds like we do now as a paid, and then hopefully we can kind of sell that last round either to ESPN or some major sponsors and advertise the shit out of it. I don't know.
Or maybe you get to a point where you have enough infrastructure to have multiple streams. Like one is like the lead card only or something, and maybe that's free, but if you want to follow the other cards, that's on the secondary stream. But it takes time to get to that point to have the infrastructure to support that. And so I'm sure it's always going to be kind of a back and forth on what you give for free and what you make people pay for and how you market it all. And like I said, on the esports end, almost no one's profitable. And again, like I'm going to be very curious to see, because we're already seeing lots of layoffs actually in esports right now this year, on how that's all going to work out, because again, everyone is expecting things for free. No one wants to pay any money. Well, someone eventually has to pay, right?
Which is really funny. And I know we're kind of sidetracking here. There's so many people right now that are doing streaming on Twitch for esports that are making money, and it's off of people. It's a lot of the Twitch version of super chats, the emotes, the subs, and things like that. So people are willing to pay. It's just what type of content are you willing to pay for? Are you willing to pay for the personal interaction you get from one person streaming versus watching whatever your favorite team is stream with 100,000 other people? Or is it more like, no, it's me and these 1,000 people right now that are dead set on this particular personality? It's a really interesting spot to be in.
Exactly, because like you said, plenty of people are willing to like pay individual streamers, but they're not going to pay a tournament organizer, to watch a stream that they already get to watch for free, because they don't get any real benefits that way. And that's actually why you've seen a lot, like in the esports side of things, we've seen a lot of it turn into watch parties, where you're starting to see tournament organizers have their official stream that they broadcast on their official channel, but they are allowing select partners to co-stream that tournament provided that they show all the same ads and all the same graphics and all that jazz. Like, they basically just get the same feed that the mainstream is showing, but they are watching it with their community. And so then all of a sudden you get to expand your viewership numbers, because now you get to start taking all of their stats and adding it to your deck, and then you're pitching that to sponsors. And so that's one of the, I think, big developments that's happened in esports in the last year, has been that, the co-streaming aspect, and using that to boost your numbers, basically.
That's a really good idea, and it's something that, with me doing less broadcasting, I may actually do a few watch parties this year for some events. On final days, YouTube free ones, kind of talk to the Pro Tour and see what we can do with that, because I think that could be a lot of fun. I know that we've done that in the past with a few other personalities. I know Simon did one when he was injured, and we've done it. As long as you're not stepping on, I think, the pay-per-view model, I think it's a pretty good option for some people. It can bring people in. So
yeah, we've seen some watch parties in disc golf, but they don't actually show the actual footage. Like, they're just showing maybe like a UDisc live scoring thing while they're just kind of talking. And I think that is like a good first step in the right direction, but I'd be curious to see if the Disc Golf Pro Tour would be interested in doing something like that, just if that would help their numbers. But that's a little bit harder when that's a paid subscription service versus like a free product like it is in esports. That's a completely different ball game. So I'll be interested to see, if that could be something.
Yeah, I don't think you could get away with it. Well, let me put it this way: you couldn't get away with it on a private stream like a Smashbox TV channel on one of the pay-per-view days. But I think the final day, where they do put it out on YouTube, I think there could be something that would work out.
Yeah,
there.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely. Well, there was a little bit of golf this weekend. Not a lot. We had really one big event. There was a few big AM events, but the one that we saw out in Arizona was the Maricopa Open. And this is an event actually that Terry, I think, has covered a few times, but not this year because, as we said, he's out chasing sunsets or something. The big news, I guess you want to call it, is Anthony Barella gets his first tournament win with Discraft discs. And we all say it's the archer, not the arrow. It was just going to take a few moments for him to probably dial in a few of his discs out on the Maricopa course, where there's not a lot of not a lot of shot shaping happening, and it's a relatively open course. You can throw almost anything you want as long as it hyzers. And I've always said, even for me, who's a 930 rated golfer, if you hand me a disc and you tell me it's overstable, I'll make it work within 10 shots. It's just a matter of what angle do I throw it on. And when someone with the talent of AB, there's no shock that he ends up winning this one over Andrew Marweed by 3 strokes. And then Adam Hannes was what looks like 10 strokes behind Anthony Barella, tied with Connor Rock, 5th place Nick Hansen, and Albert the Bazooka Tom. So Albert's in town, kind of getting his game warmed up. I know he came back from overseas a couple of weeks ago, I believe, already, just to get into into golf shape, we'll say, because from where he's from, you're not hanging out outside too much this time of year.
No, definitely not.
No, definitely not. And then in FBO, no surprise, it's her ground, it's her palace. Jennifer Allen, it's again a wide open course. Not that she didn't have good competition. 6 strokes behind her was Kat Murch. Who was 7 ratings points ahead of her. That's almost a stroke around, depending on the course SSA. And Jen Allen kind of just says, not in my hometown. Throws down 3 pretty good rounds. She's 954. Her first round was a little under her rating at 942, but then she bumped it up to 972 and 969. So she averaged, it looks like, just above her rating to take $455 home and beat out Kat Murch. And both Jen and Kat are going to be touring this year. I think Jen, as we talked to her a couple weeks ago, a little less than your Kat Murch, who should be on the tour full time. But I think you're going to start seeing some of these warmer events, your Florida events, your Arizona events, over the next 2 to 3 weeks. You're going to see a few more big names pop up as they're kind of getting warmed up. Have you noticed anything out on the socials about any of the players? I know a lot of people follow on Instagram and everything about these people kind of getting warmed up and getting ready to go for the season. Is there an excitement for the upcoming tour?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of it is like definitely in the Florida area. I think you're seeing it quite a lot. I think Paul McBeth's already played a couple of events, didn't he? Like at the end of last year, and I don't know if he played one officially in 2023, but I know he played some extra events like in December or something like that out in Florida. So there's definitely some of that. I know Matteo is like from my area, so he's I think maybe going to be playing like a local event here or there. Although Vegas is coming up in a few weeks, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to actually get into anything before then. I think he was meant to play one event, but it didn't quite come to fruition. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where it's like, the All-Star Weekend is kind of our official thing we have for the tour before the season starts, but that's not really the same type of competition as like really getting your feet wet playing one of these types of tournaments. And certainly, especially for a guy like Barella who's trying to get used to a new bag, that is worth its weight in gold to be able to go out and have like that type of tournament pressure on you, that type of official event. Then I do think that AB is going to be a force to be reckoned with this year, mostly because he gets to focus on disc golf pretty much full time this year. If I'm not mistaken, I know that he was kind of in and out of like doing school last year, and I think he's still doing like maybe some online schooling this year.
Yeah, some online school.
Point is, he can focus more on disc golf than he ever has been able to before, and we know he's got the raw talent. So if he can actually get the reps in the practice and like get the mental game sorted, like the kid is one of the most gifted like athletes we have in the sport as far as like what he's capable of doing with the disc.
Yeah, he's Eagle to me. He's Eagle caliber. If he can, and very similar to Eagle early in his years, Eagle had a little issue with consistency. People bagged on him a little bit for wooded courses. People bagged on him a little bit for just general focus and a little bit of we'll say a hothead on the course. As we know, he had the USDGC incident where he punched the ground and ended up, breaking his hand. And AB hasn't shown you that type of passion in a Nico sense almost, but I think AB has the same. I mean, he's the same body type as Eagle, and AB has just as much talent. All AB really needs to focus on is a little bit of his putting game, I think, and the mental side of it, being comfortable in that lead position, because it feels like he gets. It's almost every event you can kind of count on it, where he gets to that first card, and then falls apart. Has those 2 or 3 just monster holes where he takes a double or a triple bogey and knocks himself off the lead card onto the 3rd card or something along those lines. I think if AB can really clean that up, it wouldn't shock me to hear that AB wins 2 Elite Series this year. So it's and that's hard to say that anybody can win 2 Elite Series, because other than probably Ricky and maybe Eagle, there's so much competition out there.
I mean, you can definitely see the trajectory for AB. I mean, like when you kind of look back, like 2021, 2020, I mean, he would maybe get like the occasional top 10 finish at a Pro Tour event, but last year he had multiple finishes within the top 5 at Elite Series events. I'm thinking about like Ledgestone and OTB, for example, and had several other events within the top 15 and top 20. So he's progressively getting more consistent in his results at the top tier tournaments. Like you can always count on the guy to be super strong in his local scene in Arizona. Like, I mean, he's always doing those things. And, obviously he's always like a dark horse pick at an open course. But I do feel like you have seen the steady progression. If you just go back and look at the results, look at how much he's cashing, look at where he's placing on the Disc Golf Pro Tour at the biggest events. And every year it seems like there's that steady climb, a couple of placements higher than where he was the year before. And now I think he can even throw some more accelerant on it by not having that same like school responsibility that he had before. He's fully touring with Adam. I think they're riding together everywhere. They're going to Europe together. Like, it just feels like that dedication is there. And I think that Discraft picked him up at like just the right time. Like, that was such a clutch pickup to like get the guy right when he's like ready to come into his own. And yeah, I definitely am with you. I would not be surprised if AB won an event this year. I expect him to be a consistent top 20 player this year.
It's hard to make me feel bad for the big guy, but I almost feel a little bad for Innova. Like, Innova has sponsored AB for how many years? All through his, high school, pre-high school, through middle school, high school, college. The last 10 years, I believe he's been with Innova. And just when AB's ready to kind of, I feel like, go on this big tear, he takes a step away. And I know we've talked to some people behind the scenes that know Innova pretty well, and they don't usually fight for players. If you are a player on the Innova team, for the most part, if you tell them, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else, they kind of have a notion of, all right, good luck, we wish you the best. They don't usually fight to keep players. They fought to keep AB and lost. I know there was negotiations quite a bit going back and forth, because I think Innova sees the potential in AB just like Discraft does. Well, I mean, just like any of us do. So,
well, I think if you're Innova, eventually you have to keep somebody. You know what I mean? Like, you can't keep letting them fly off the shelf, and that's why Calvin probably did get the deal he deserved to. Because if Innova would have lost Heimberg, I mean, you would have lost like the main guy for your MPO team that can actually get you on the podium on an in and out basis. They also did huge, by the way, being able to keep Henna and Evelina. Like, I think if they would have lost one of those two or both, that would have like really crushed them on the FPO side of things, since they already lost Maria. They have Cat Merch as well, I guess, and a few others. But, I think Innova's at the point now. I think they're coming to the realization, like, look, like, yeah, maybe we can afford to let a few go, but there's not a lot left to let go, like, on the Innova side of things. Like, you got to start fighting now. I think this was the year that they finally did it, by keeping Calvin and keeping some of those FPO players.
Yeah, they kept Calvin off the free market by signing him in the fall, to not let him hit that option. And you're right. At some point, you need to start keeping some players, and because Innova is a little bit weak at their top end. They've got a lot of great names. You've got Philo, you've got Sexton, you've got Germ. Those are all great names, but they're not names you're seeing up in the top very often. And we'll see what happens with Sexton, who's going to be touring a little bit more this season, and he's Mr. Consistency. So if it wouldn't shock me to see him take a bunch of top 10s this year either.
Sure.
Maybe even pull down a win. I'd say a little bit later in the season. I don't see him really probably taking down one of the big thrower courses. It's just not his style. But you get to the West Coast, kind of the Pacific Northwest maybe, where he's from, as well as the East Coast, nothing would shock me to see Nate Sexton pulling a win. But you're right, Innova just doesn't have the MPO top tier. Now like you said, they've locked in their FPO, and I'm excited to see what Evelina and Henna can do this year.
I mean, it's just the putting for them. And I feel like that's been the story for a while, and you feel like if that could somehow get solved, like if there was just like a magic wand that took that out of the equation, like those people are hunting after Tatar every weekend at that point. And then all of a sudden, the top 5 of FPO becomes like crazy parity, in my opinion, if they can sort that out.
Yeah, on the course, Robert Lester, you're right. I missed out. Bradley Williams as well is one of those top tier Innova guys.
Yep. And Joel Freeman. You can throw that in there too.
Yeah, you're right. Joel Freeman as well. Joel's funny because he's sneaky. Like you don't feel like rarely does anyone pick Joel Freeman to win, but he's such a consistent like 5th place finisher. He's always fighting for 3rd to 5th place, but the occasional chance at a win. But what a and I would say Joel Freeman even over Bradley Williams. Bradley has been he got the win last year at the Preserve, but other than that, he had a good couple of weeks and then kind of vanished a little bit on the tour. And by vanishing, we're talking top 15s, just barely out of talking points. These are such competitive events that you can't that it feels like we put such weight on the top 5. And if you're not top 5, we don't even think about you. You kind of forget about these players that have a chance to win and they don't. So, what else do we have going on in the sport? We're looking at. Well, I know you and I talked. Oh yeah, we saw a wedding this weekend down in Texas. Congratulations to Valerie Mondahano and Mason Ford. And we say Valerie Mondahano because I believe it was asked, and she is keeping her last name of Mondahano. I don't know haven't checked any state legal records. I don't know if it's an official name change or name keep, so to speak, or if it's just going to be social, disc golf social, like we saw with Val Doss Jenkins, who obviously her last name is Doss, but for disc golf purposes, she kept it as Jenkins. So I'm not exactly sure what Val is, the other Val, Mondahano, if she's keeping that or she's going to go with Ford for all her legal documents. But I believe for disc golf, she said she was going to keep Mondahano and kind of go from there, which makes a lot of sense for branding purposes. And you know, she's kind of built up a name. I think, and maybe I don't know, but I would speculate that if this happened 2 years earlier, she might go with publicly go with a Ford name. But over the last year, she's really made a name for herself. And to keep that is, it can be, that can be some significant cash, you know, your brand.
No, I think that's like a really fair point. I think you're right. Because, I mean, her breakout was last year with those 2 wins and, like, being a consistent, like, top 10 player throughout the course of the entire season. And, you know, I think everyone who was like a hardcore fan of disc golf knew of the Mondahano sisters and, like, knew what the potential that they had and had, like, a vague idea of, like, who they were. But there's no doubt that what Valerie did last year was nothing short of, like, a breakout year for her. And then that's why she got the big deal from Discraft. That's why she, you know, Dynamic couldn't keep her. You know, she was a player that proved that. And Holland Hanley was basically identical in that regard. I think they're ranked right next to each other. And both made the same exact move from Dynamic to Discraft. And so I think you're right. Like, Mondahano, that is a name now that has, like, a punch to it in the disc golf space. People know that name now. And so I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that, you know, Terry usually fills me in on a lot of the upcoming women that he sees when he travels around the country and does a lot of filming for other events. And I think he had filmed Am Worlds when the Mondahano sisters were out there. If I remember, he might have the only footage of that one of one of them winning the junior, maybe it was Junior Worlds when they won. I'd have to go back and look for sure. He'd be able to tell me. But so he when he comes back, him and I always chat, and he tells me, he's like, you know, he told me about Holland Hanley before she obviously got signed by DD. He's like, man, there's this girl out there. She's phenomenal. She crushes. He's like, I think she's going to be a real player in the game. I was like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, I reached out to DD and this and that. And he helped kind of start to get that arrangement. You know, getting those names out early has always been, I've always been privy to a little bit, just, you know, a few months ahead of the curve, thanks to Terry and a lot of his coverage. So, and he warned me about the Mondahano sisters way back when they were kind of tearing up the AM scene, and he was covering them. He's like, yeah, both of them, they're going to be phenomenal. He's like, they're more or less trained by Bradley Williams. They've got the smoothest throw. He's like, if they can just, at the time they were AMs, if they can just get some consistency, they're going to go on tour and they're going to win. So it's exciting to see some of these players that I've watched or seen on coverage from Terry over the last 5, 6, 7 years start to really shine. Same with Missy Gannon, I think. I think Terry was one of the early ones on Missy Gannon as well. So
yeah, I'm kind of curious to see, like, who's next. Like, I think Stacey Haas from MVP is kind of one that is a young up-and-comer that had some good results last year that I think could be, like, another FPO player, that, like, could break out next year. I also think Stacey Ronsley is, like, a player to still keep an eye on. Like, she may not have had, like, the craziest results last year, but the athleticism and such is, like, the eye test passes for me. And now that she maybe has, like, more support with the whole Castaplast Switch sponsorship, like, those are kind of the names I want to keep an eye on as, like, maybe the next FPO player to, like, have, like, a really big breakout year or something like that. Those are the two that I'm kind of rooting for.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was talking earlier about kind of putting together a website for Skip Ace. I was actually writing a few quick articles, just filler stuff to kind of when eventually debut the website, just to have some things on there. And one of them was 3 FPO sleepers this year. And I think the 3 that I mentioned were Allie Smith, a DGA sponsor player who won Am Worlds last year. She's only been playing for 3 years. And she's got a lot of potential to move up, to move around. You know, she's early in the career and she's going to start touring. You've got, who else did I have on there? I had Allie Smith. I had, did I have Aria Castorita, who was the rookie of the year last year?
That's a good call.
And she knows how to win. I mean, there's, Annika Steed is another one who's kind of sitting in that 930 range, and for the first time ever is going to come over to the tour. I don't think she's going to jump up right away and start winning, but it's kind of there's a little bit of debate about the European ratings and whether they're pushed down or compressed because they don't get a chance to play against the top names. So if you have a European player that's maybe a 920 rate or a 930, it might really be closer to a 940 or 950 when they come over here, start competing, get a bigger pool of points, so to speak. So we might see someone like an Annika Steed come over and really play well. And the other one I'm excited to see is Sai Ananda, who I think Sai has always been a really consistent player. And I think she's
a ninja. She's a ninja because she won't play a lot of events, but then she'll just sneak into one event like U.S. Women's or something like that. Then she'll just like place top 5 out of nowhere. Just like, who is Sai Ananda? And then before you know it, she's gone. She's not playing anymore. And it's like she just kind of pops in and out. But I do kind of wonder what like this new West Side like sponsorship, which is kind of because she was with Latitude, correct? And then she sidesteps then, I guess, to West Side.
Sounds right.
Because she basically takes Erica Stinchcomb's spot, essentially, on West Side. So I do wonder if, like, maybe that's... And she's on their, like, top level... Because, like, you know how they have, like, the tiers of teams. I think West Side's is, like, Warlords is, like, their highest tier. That's the one that Matteo's on. So I think Sai Ananda was put on that team. So hopefully that's a sign that she's touring more. Because,
it looks like she signed up for the first leg of the tour from what I saw.
She's a sleeper, man. Like, she could definitely pop up and get some big results. That's a good call by you.
Yeah, I think those are the 3 that I'm going to be looking at this year is Annika, Allie Smith, and Sai Ananda. I think those 3 are going to be ones to watch out for. People that haven't...
Yeah, Sai played 7 events last year.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
And she took like 6th or 7th at US...
7th at US Women's.
US Women's. Now, she's not going to blow you out of the water with her distance, but her consistency is always there. And you're right. I feel like she kind of moves around the course like a ninja too. She's just very, very quiet and smooth and just gets the job done. And gets in and out.
The one that got me was in 2021 when I had never heard of her, and then she placed 8th at Worlds. And that was when I think like I first heard the name Sai Ananda, and I was like, holy cow, like where did this come from? But then, like I said, that was like one of only 8 events she played the entire year. And then last year she played 7, and like we said, she got that big result at US Women. So like you said, she signed up for a lot of events on this first leg. So Sai could definitely be like a cool breakout player next year.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really want to see her do well. For whatever reason, maybe it's because she's so inconsistent playing. I always root for her when I do see her. I want her to win or play well because it's just like I like to see it. Harkens back a little bit to my youth in when you didn't have full-time touring players and you had the Barry Schultz and the Ken Klymos who were weekend warriors and won. They were the best players in the world, but they had a full-time job. And I kind of feel like that's where Sai was for the last few years. She would just pop in, she'd play really well, and then get out. And I always root for that type of player. In general, it's the underdog story, the player who doesn't dedicate their life to it, but is just that natural talent. So yeah, Sai Ananda, mark it down. If you are drafting for Skip Ace and you want to wait to the very end to pick up an FPL player, don't overlook Sai.
Definitely not.
What else do we got to talk about, Dust? It's been a kind of a quiet week. You and I kind of rattled through a few things before the show. Is there anything that I missed?
Let's see, kind of looking through chat. We had some like, what do we think the biggest storylines of 2023 are going to be? That's an interesting one. We talked about a couple like players we think might be breakouts or like names to keep an eye on. I think one of the biggest stories of 2023. This is like way out into the future, by the way. So like, I'm sorry, but it's going to be the bidding war for Gannon Buhr at the end of the year. That's going to be one of the big stories. That's the next big piece. Because Prodigy, I don't know what happened there, but notice that there was no announcement of a re-signing of Gannon Buhr, and his contract is up at the end of 2023. And I have never seen a kid more in my life built for disc golf than Gannon Buhr. I mean, just like literally he was made for disc golf, and obviously had a huge year last year. I think that will only continue because he's done school now. So kind of a similar situation to AB, like fully focused forward on disc golf. So I expect to see a lot more of Gannon Buhr at the top. And then I expect to see huge amount of like speculation and bidding going on to lock Gannonburr up for 2024.
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting pressure on Gannon, and I don't know if he's conscious enough to feel it, that this contract year is a huge deal for him. We're talking like lifetime changing money, possibly. You know, he's the type of player, like we said, with an AB, that if you're Prodigy, you're talking to him right now about wrapping him up for next year. Like, and I know he's got another year on his contract, so it's quite possible that they just kind of stepped back. I had heard rumors that Gannon had tried to not necessarily get out of his contract, but that there was talks of him moving, either buyouts or whatnot. And I don't know how, again, these are rumors, so things can get blown out of proportion. So don't take that with more than a grain of salt. But the same thing we said about Kelvin last year is that this is the player that you build around. This is your premier player. This is your Discraft has Paul Macbeth, DD has Ricky, Innova has Calvin. You know, we used to think that Prodigy had KJ, but that's not the case. This is your player. This is the guy you build your team around. He's really young. You try to sign him for a 4 to 5 year deal, and you hand him $500,000 or more.
Yeah, it's tough because Prodigy is, in my opinion, almost worse than Innova when it comes to letting players go, because, like, yeah, they had the big signing, like the re-signing of Kevin Jones. I think that was like maybe a year or two ago, back when you started to see some of his original molds come out, like the reverb and the distortion and like that whole like line of KJ disc. But outside of that, it's been like nothing but losses. Like, they've had some of their young talent that they had like kind of rise up and break out. You know, obviously Gannonburr, huge year last year. Isaac Robinson, huge year last year. Alton Harris had his moments last year. So like they almost got, lucky as a company that like some of their like younger players just like stepped up and started getting results and like kind of put Prodigy on the map a little bit. But let's be honest, like they haven't really ever filled any of the voids of people that they have lost over the years. Like, they have not filled the void in FPO of the loss of Katrina Allen, or the fact that Heather Young is still kind of, I don't know what's going on with Heather Young actually. But
I'd love to know. I just out of curiosity, I'd love to know what she's doing. Is she working a corporate gig somewhere? Is she, you know, what is Heather Young's life like right now? Because I follow up every little while on social media and nothing's been updated or anything. So I just out of pure curiosity, I want to know what's going on with Heather Young. But you're right.
Then obviously Dickerson on the MPO side was a big loss, you know, the previous year to Discraft. So it's like they've taken nothing but L's as far as like people leaving their company, and they haven't, like, other than just by virtue of the fact that the contract length is still there, so they haven't had to do anything in that regard other than maybe enforce a buyout if some other company was interested this offseason. They haven't really made a big move. So this would be the time to do it. Like, lock Gannonburr in. I was shocked that it wasn't announced. Like, I thought for sure that Prodigy, and I'm gonna say this: if Gannon was the one who said no and wants to wait, then props to you, kid, because that was the right call. Because like right now, like, your stock is soaring. Like, let it keep going. Let it keep going. Let it rise up. Like, I think whether it was him, his parents, or if he has an agent, smart move on them not to re-sign. For Prodigy, that's a tough one that you didn't get that one done in the offseason. That one's gonna sting.
Yeah, you're betting on Gannon is betting on himself at this point, because
if a smart bet.
If he comes out and, you know, school's done, literally his sole focus is disc golf now. That's all he needs to think about. If he comes out and doesn't perform this year, it's going to cost him money. Period. Is he a flash in the pan? No, I don't think so. But you can see that somebody might be hesitant depending on, I mean, he's a young kid. He's 18 years old, I think.
Who?
Yeah. I don't think he's 17. I think he's 18 now.
Who?
Gannon, right? 18?
He's younger than that.
Is he 17 then?
Yeah, I think he's like 17, yeah.
Is he still 17? Okay.
Yeah.
17 or 18, either way, because he graduated. So regardless, he's so young that you have to wonder. I don't think he's walking away from the sport. He sees his potential. He sees the money. You can see the dollar signs coming for him. I mean, he is he he's looking like a generational player that you're going to want to keep for the next 10 years. Now, whether that happens, we'll see. Whether somebody else steps up and snags him, I don't know. There are other companies that I think could really use a Gannon Buhr. If Prodigy can't re-sign him, I could see a Discmania reaching out and grabbing him.
Yep, that's the one. I'm thinking if it's not Prodigy, my bets would be either Discmania to fill back the void of having lost Simon, and I think they'll have the money to do it because if their rumors are true about them getting a buyout for Simon, because that has been speculated, if that's true, and the fact that they didn't spend big this offseason, right? They re-signed Ella, they re-signed Cynthia. I think Kyle had already been re-signed the year prior, so they didn't spend any money. Supposedly they got buyout money.
They got $1 million.
The money is there to go get Gannon Buhr, right? The other company that I think should be looking at Gannon is Latitude 64 because they don't have a marquee guy, in my opinion.
Not a U.S. person. No,
they don't.
This might be like the optimal time because I know Latitude is kind of starting to build up their U.S. presence. They got Seth Fenley now on that, who was part of the Disc Golf Pro Tour, working as a full-time employee. I don't know what he's doing as far as team aspect goes, but Discmania makes sense, but this is also Eagle contract year. Can you come out with an Eagle and a Gannon Buhr in the same year? Sign because they're both young. I think Eagle is only 23 or 24, and that's a guy that you want to sign for probably 5 to 7 years.
I would imagine Eagle's the bigger priority, but like if you could pull both, and I think the talks at least happen.
Yeah.
But I would personally like to see Latitude also get in on that mix, just because again they don't have that marquee player. And as you noted, they are expanding their U.S. presence a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense for Latitude to try to make a move if they, and I was gonna say if they have the money. We know they have the money because they're minting everybody's discs right now. They could easily just put a slowdown on some people's discs in order to get to
JVD. You mean that Italian sea line isn't? Oh, never mind.
It's not really Italian. It's not really Italian,
right? It's
I mean, it might somehow travel through Italy. The plastic might from somewhere but no, it's not Italian. Unless somebody's eating pizza next to the molding machine, it's not very Italian.
No, it's definitely not. It's very much not.
But yeah, so that's kind of the potential for those two. I think Gannon and Eagle are both going to be big news for 2023. Figuring out what's going to go on with them. I'll be interested to see because I don't know how long Kevin. I'd have to look at one of the trackers to find out how long Kevin's deal is. But I do know that the Kevin deal, the rumors are the Kevin deal kind of had an influence on some of the players that left Prodigy, in that Prodigy put a lot of stock into Kevin Jones and.
He's through 2025.
Through 2025. Okay, so he's got 2 more years then technically through that they put a lot of stock in Kevin Jones and didn't have necessarily what they wanted for your Chris Dickerson, for your Katrina Allen, and that maybe caused a little sourness inside the team, and which is why we saw some people move. And again, you can't blame Kevin for that. Kevin got his bag, man. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll see if Prodigy, if Prodigy wants to continue and push, if they feel like Kevin is the poster boy, or if they want to, try to get your Alden Harris or because I think Isaac might be up this year too, because Isaac's on a one year deal. We interviewed him a few weeks ago. He's on a 1 year deal. So Prodigy's in a position where they might have some money freed up, and they might have a few players to go after. So it's going to be it's going to be a wild off season next year for some of these young guys, unless they get signed early on, unless we see like a July or October signing to say an extension, so to speak.
There's also one guy slightly older who's on their contract year this year that we should talk about in this regard, and that is Matteo.
Yeah.
Contract up with Westside at the end of this year. And look, I get it. Like, that one's tougher because I think he is like 32 or 33 years old. But the man is still a consistent top performer. And I'm a little biased. I'm just go ahead and come out and say it. I'm a friend of Matteo. We're from the same county. You know, we play together, we talk all the time. But the reality of the situation is the man is currently ranked number 7 in the UDIS World Rankings. He's a consistent top 5 contender at almost every tournament he plays at, no matter what style of course it is. He's actually gotten better, I would argue, last year. His distance is higher now. His putting game is well-rounded. And the other big thing about Matteo is that no one doesn't like Matteo. Like, everyone likes him. Like, every single person, like, finds his quirky personality, like, they love it. Like, they suck it up. Like, any piece of content that's out there that Matteo's on, it's gold. Like, it's all over the disc golf subreddit. It's talked about everywhere. Anytime he's a part of a skins match or he's on coverage, you never know what the guy's going to do or what he's going to say. He doesn't know what he's going to do or he's going to say. But whatever it is, it inevitably winds up being entertaining or funny or both, while also being an absolute, like, consistent performer. He has that golden combination of not only being able to, like, you know, contend for every title, but also be that personality. The only problem with Matt has been that he isn't that guy that's going to be super active on social media. So you need someone kind of behind him, kind of doing that for him, whether that be like an agent or whether that be like a social media manager. Like, someone just needs to follow Matteo with the camera and post that on Instagram all the time. Like, that just needs to be somebody's job, because he's gold. He's content gold. So I do think that he is going to be one that I will be curious to see what kind of happens with him this year, if he can kind of keep up the performance levels, if Westside or someone finds a way to market him better to get, because he's not going to do it himself, like, but to get behind him on social media, to get him out there more, and then kind of see where it goes from there. So that's like one other contract that's up at the end of the year that I think will be interesting to see, because I think he's probably got like one more big contract left in him, if you're just going by age. And so certainly wishing the best for him.
Yeah, he might have that. He might have that 3 to 4 year contract left in him, because we've seen that the sport, you know, can it. You don't necessarily lose the skills when you start to hit those ages. You know, Matteo is already 33. He's been doing this. Like I said, if you want to go back and look at him in the Final Four with Nate Doss back in like 2000 and whatever, the video's out there somewhere. And Matteo and his I think it was a Derek Jeter jersey. It was such a different time, man. Such a different time. But he's out there and he's been around forever. And, you know, I saw Matteo when he was literally a child. Like I'm 10 years older, 10 plus years older than him. And I remember seeing him when he was 7 or 8 years old out there. Cause Terry and I went down to Alabama for spring break. And one of the guys we wanted to see was Jim Oram, Sky South. He was a big seller back in the day. And, you know, and so we went into Jim's house, which looked like a mini warehouse, and there's little Matteo running around. And at the time, it was just this annoying little kid who's 8 years old. You know, Terry and I are like 18, 19 years old, kind of checking out, you know, as 18 or 19-year-old kids do in college on spring break. We're checking out some weird old man's warehouse and playing disc golf tournaments. But yeah, little Matteo running around. I've got a soft spot for him as well. Like same thing with Double G when we went down to Florida the next year, and Double G was, you know, 3'2" and throwing 450 feet. Both of those guys to me have a soft spot in my heart. But I think Matteo, he doesn't do anything that is crazy flashy as far as distance, which is why I think his game can hold up for another few years. He's not like an eagle that puts so much torque on his body. Matteo is all that curl and spin. And I don't see a lot of, knock on wood, I don't see a lot of potential for big injury risks with Matteo.
No.
Like I can with some of these guys like a Gannon who are crushing forehands, and Eagle, and, you know, or Kelvin, who puts so much torque on his ankle and his shoes that you just think that something's going to break.
But that was the crazy thing about Matt, is he actually added distance last year at 32 years old, which not many people probably knew that, but like he saw it, we all noticed it. Like the guy was throwing about 50 feet further last year than he had ever thrown before, and he still got. I mean, the big thing he's known for is carving lines in the woods. Like that's his thing. He's very good at that, and you know, and then his putting is also, you know, top notch. So yeah, I think that either Westside needs to re-sign that man, because I feel like he fits that brand so well. Like that's the thing.
Quirky,
like it feels like a great exactly. Just
unique,
everything about it feels great.
Yeah, it's hard to see him. It's funny because it's hard to see for me in my mind Matteo anywhere else. It's hard for me to see Matteo anywhere because I don't think because of his social media presence. So he doesn't to me fit into a brand particularly. I know places he doesn't seem like he fits. Like I can't imagine a Matteo at Discraft for some reason. Like that just doesn't seem that doesn't vibe or fit. If Discraft wants to offer the guy a bunch of money, by all means take it. But that just it's not a match made in heaven. Is kind of how I feel. But a West Side, a Latitude might work out. Maybe an Innova, depending on what they want to do. But it feels like Innova isn't looking to invest in someone that age. They should be looking young. They in theory should be looking younger than that if you're looking at picking up talent.
I think it would be like a trilogy re-signing of some sort, or it would be like maybe an Infinite or, something along those lines, I think, or would be the ones that make the most sense. But I still personally think he's got several more years left in him as a player. And I think that just based on his personality, if you can just like craft it in the right way, like he could have a future elsewhere in disc golf past being a player if it's guided, because again, he doesn't really seem to have like the push to do it himself. But I think if someone kind of got behind him and like figured it out, I think he's someone that we'd love to have around the sport for a long time.
Well, as long as Nick Saban keeps coaching, I think Matteo will keep playing.
There you go.
Coming up this week, actually, as we get ready for the DGPT All-Stars, which we mentioned earlier, is the 2023 All-Star Draft. I'm looking at the Disc Golf Pro Tour's YouTube page, and right now they have it says the 2023 MPO All-Star Draft. I don't know if that's going to be MPO and FPO, if it's just a labeling thing, or if I heard that they were going to do drafts separately for MPO and FPO 2 different times. But that right now is scheduled for February 10th at 6 p.m. So I believe that's Central Time. I think this is local to me, so you can kind of go on to their YouTube page and hit the notify me button if you're interested in watching the draft. I know we broadcast it last year. It was kind of chaotic, but I believe they've got a little bit better method this year, and it could be a little bit more fun. So if you're looking at who's going to be, on each All-Star team, last year's All-Star event was really exciting. It turned out with some really fun competition at the end, and Eagle hitting a really huge putt to push that. By all means, go ahead and tune into the 2023 MPO All-Star Draft. This Friday? So if today's the 7th, Wednesday, this Friday. Okay, 3 days from now at 6 p.m.
Speaking of Eagle, that's going to be a crazy story this year, isn't it? Like, since we're talking storylines for 2023, like, you can't think of a crazier roller coaster ride than Eagle McMahon. Like, comes in, expected to be a top 5 player, gets injured, gone, comes back, wins the European Open in blistering fashion, gone again, had kind of a struggle at Worlds, but now this is the offseason that supposedly gets him back healthy. But how healthy has he been able to get between now and when he steps on that first tee box? Because obviously we know what a meteoric talent he can be, but like, is the forehand back? Are we going to see more lefty backhand? Can he be top 5 again? Like, that's going to be an awesome story to follow throughout this year.
I get the rough feeling that we're going to see less Eagle forehands. Probably. Not that we're not going to see any, but we're going to see less than we have in the past. I think he's going to rely a little bit more on his turnover shots, maybe a little bit more on his lefty than we've seen. He normally, I think we saw him pull that out at European Open 2 or 3 times around, maybe twice around, just in general. And it's funny watching what he did even at the All-Star last year with his lefty versus, shots where he would normally be throwing just a little pitch up forehand, he avoided last year, and it cost him strokes. You could see it. You could see how uncomfortable Eagle is with a 150-foot backhand turnover shot. At least he was. He's had a lot of time to sit and practice it, where if you're so used to being able to walk up and just flick a disc 150 feet and be within 15, those touch backhand anhyzer shots it's a shot that I think we're slowly, I don't say losing in the game, but it's way less relied upon than it used to be when people didn't throw both ways. And so to see our players have to maybe think about their health and hopefully get these touch shots a little bit more dialed in, a little bit better, is going to be interesting, especially on Eagles' part. I hope, obviously we hope nothing but the best for his health. I saw a post on Instagram today where he was playing with his ball and stick, flipping it around and doing all sorts of things. So he looks happy, he looks healthy, and I hope he can perform as well as he wants to, because like we said, man, this is his contract year. This is the spot. This is the chance for him to prove that he's going to be worth it for the next 5 years, because he's got a big dark cloud over his head from the last couple of years being injured, whether it was his hand, whether it was his shoulder, whether it's an elbow, whatever it might be. He needs to prove that he can last an entire year, or that, not to say he's not going to sign a big contract, but that dollar value, that could be one extra zero. that could be definitely an extra zero here or there for him to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wish him the best, and I think that at the very least, he probably has that like 250 and in forehand probably dialed, and like I would imagine feels super safe with that, because that's not a whole lot of elbow anyway. That's more wrist flick than anything. So I think that that's probably going to be back. But yeah, it will be interesting to see like how does he attack these left to right moving shots that pushes over 350 feet. Like, do you trust it, or are you going to go into the backhand? I do think that at the very least he was probably forced to develop some skills and gain some experience doing some different types of throws with the backhand last year because of the injury, which might make him a well-rounded player long-term because he was forced to do that. But I do think that, I mean, I can't know his psyche on how timid he will be stepping up to the tee, you know, tournament on the line. I need to throw a 400-foot forehand. Do I trust it? You know, like that's going to be like the big question mark if he gets put in a situation like that. But it does seem like he's dedicated to trying to make it happen. I mean, he changed his diet. He's like obviously going through rehab and doing all these different things to try to be at his best. And we know he's got the skills. So it's just about, can he stay healthy, and has he had a good enough recovery during the offseason? Because if he did, that just makes the parity of MPO even more interesting, because that's one more player on the board now that can win any week.
It's amazing, because I think like it's hard to win when you're not competing, but Eagle kind of throws that out the window. He showed it last year at the European Open.
I don't think people understand how crazy that was. I really don't. Like, I don't think people appreciate how bonkers that is, really. Like, I'm sure people are like, wow, that is impressive. But it's actually absurd that he was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the types of shots he was able to not have in his bag and still win. And to do it in that, I mean, they were light years ahead of everyone else by the end of the tournament.
Hands down.
It was ridiculous.
They were playing a different tournament than everybody else.
Yeah. That must have been some of the biggest separation we saw all year, and maybe for a while, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was ludicrous what Eagle did that tournament.
And I mean, it's not like, here's what I'll say. Eagle knows how to compete. And it's not like Eagle wasn't playing at all going up to that event. He just wasn't playing tournaments. He clearly was playing and practicing, and he's had years of experience in the spotlight. So for him to come out and play the way he did, to me, isn't extremely shocking. It's shocking how much better he played than every other player. Like that is amazing. Like had he come out and played and competed and was in neck and neck with every player, like amazing. That's a great sign. But the fact that it came out and him and Paul just again, like I said, played their own tournament. They didn't have to think about another player. It was a heads-up match going into that final round, and the way they elevated and separated themselves is truly epic. It really is, and it makes me want to almost go back and watch that particular event again. And I don't do that very often.
I mean, imagine being Paul Macbeth, shooting 2 rounds over 1080 rated, having your worst round be 1051 rated, and you still lost the tournament.
Yeah,
that's just how incredible Eagle played. Like, he beat Paul like in prime mode, like McBeast mode Paul, throwing up bonkers ratings, and he still beat that guy. That's how well he played with one arm. I mean, like I said, like people will have to look back on that, I think, years from now and just have to realize like that might be one of the most incredible tournament win stories ever.
It is definitely crazy. I'm looking right now. someone had said that there was an event that this weekend that Owen Scoggins. Did Owen Scoggins win an event this weekend? La Mirada Open. Yeah, February 4th and 5th. That was this past weekend. So there is. I think this is. Yeah, this is a B tier. So it's not a big event. That's why I probably missed my my sights. And we saw Jacob Curtis, Cupcake, win this one. He shot a 13 under par. Luke Sampson shooting a 12 under par.
This is the one that Jackie Chin came in for as well, I believe.
This is the one that Jackie Chen came in for. He is I know I was talking about FPL players to watch. He's one of my MPL players to watch. He's 995 rated right now, I think 994 rated. I'm looking, and I feel like he's not. He came out with such a fervor last year because he debuted at 1040. He shot like 4 or 5 phenomenal rounds. I think 3 of them were counted in that first rating, and then he kind of came back down to earth. But I believe he's a better player than 994.
Sure.
I think he's one of those players that he came over to the U.S. last year, and it was probably a culture shock. That's a difficult transition to come from playing such small events to the big spotlight. And so I believe he's a better player than 994. So in the little article I wrote, I kind of just mentioned I don't expect him to be competing for wins this year, but if you want to value pick someone that you can get at 994 and he's going to play 1015, 1020, maybe 1030 rated golf, he's one of the guys you look at. He's kind of your sleeper, very similar to like an Ali Smith or a Sayananda, where you're looking at their rating and you're going to get a better player than what their rating says right now. It wouldn't shock me if, I think he's only scheduled through like the first few, he's not scheduled for anything past Vegas. So I don't know what his plan is. So kind of keep an eye on that.
I think last year Vegas is the only Pro Tour event he played.
It might have been. I don't know what his deal is. I would love to see him tour more and play more because I think he could really shine there. But yes, Jackie Chen came in. He took 7th place. Like I said, 994. Shot about 1,010 rated golf. It looks like if I look at that, 1,009 and 1,070. So about 1,015 rated golf. Beating Peter McBride, Andrew Miranda, Noah Jackson, and Gavin Babcock, who are all on tour right now. And then you go over to the pro women, which we were speaking of, and you're right. Owen Scoggins wins by 5 strokes over Maria Oliva and Hannah Stevanovic. I think I nailed that one. Nice. As well as tied with 3rd place with Violet Main. So Owen Scoggins, I would say probably not. And I don't. It's hard to say because you look at the last round. Her last round was 936. She shot 2 rounds. First one 991. You look at it and you think, all right, cool. She's right on pace to continue doing what she did last year. And then she comes out with a 936. But it's La Mirada. It is a unique course where it's one of those early courses. So she might have been able to walk it in at the end. You're not exactly sure what's going on. So it's hard to judge that final round of 936 when, she already had such a lead on the field. She went into that round with a 9-stroke lead over Maria Oliva. So she might have maybe took her foot off the gas a little bit. I wouldn't put too much stock in a 936 round for Owen Scoggins other than her rating. That's the thing that sucks is that you're penalized for your rating when you can kind of walk it in. But ultimately, as we know, nobody cares about ratings. Nobody at that level cares about ratings. They care about the money and the win. So
that's right.
So La Mirada, a fun event out there in La Mirada, California. Home of the kind of one of the home courses of the Legacy boys, Stephen Bamba Rico. They're known in that area, but this one is the La Mirada Open Pro driven by Innova. So congratulations to Cupcake in the MPO and Owen Scoggins on the FPO. Anything else?
Another one though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just saying, like we talked about, like 2023 storylines, keep an eye on. I was gonna kind of wrap up MPO just by saying, like, can some of these like breakout performers keep it up, like Isaac and Alden, and some of these guys like that. But for the FPO side, can Kristen do it again? Like, can she have another year like that, or will we see some of these breakout players like Holland Handley and Valerie Mandujano, be able to challenge her more? Or, are we going to see like Paige return with some vigor next year because she still has that? Paige is such a weird case for me because like on the one hand, she seems like she has that fire that she wants to chase that major record. Like that's something that she wants. And like, there's that whole like line in the documentary where she says that like she doesn't feel like she's the best. She has to win that next Worlds to be the best, like to have the most. And so you have that side of Paige, but then you have the other side of Paige that you hear in interviews where she makes it sound like she doesn't care. Or I'm sure she cares, but like you get what I mean. Like that the same fire isn't quite behind what she says sometimes. Like in other interviews that you'll see where she's like more about kind of like just playing, having fun, enjoying herself, and those are all valid things, by the way. Like I'm not,
she's happy.
Exactly, yeah,
and that hurts her. Like honestly,
yeah.
like, I think
so
that hurts.
It's a weird one.
That hurts any athlete. Happiness, and
right.
and I know it's maybe not happiness, contentness. I think contentness is the word I'm looking for, not happiness. I want all my athletes to be happy, but contentness, I think, has hurt Paige a little bit. And we'll see what happens. She just got back from a trip over in, I think, Thailand and Malaysia. And so she's back. She made a post yesterday or today saying how she's really excited for the 2023 season. She's going to start. She's starting to train and tour and practice and get ready for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like her last season was bad. I
no,
mean, she had
God, no.
She won 2 majors. She had some other wins, some other top 5s.
She said it herself. She's missing the fire. Like,
yeah.
She has kind of, and I put a little bit of this on Paul McBeth as well. The fire just isn't there for the regular season. Like the Pro Tour used to be for I'll say not used to, for these 2 players. Used to be awesome. They would get up for these events because they mattered so much the first few years. I feel like the Pro Tour doesn't matter to them as much anymore, and that they are focused on the majors. Like the Pro Tour is like an A- to them, and the majors are an A+. They care about those majors. That's where they get their fire. We saw last year Paul McBeth kind of felt like he, if he showed up to he wants to win, and he gets upset when he doesn't, but he doesn't put forth the effort like he does at the majors. There's a hands down difference in a Paul McBeth at a major than a Paul McBeth anywhere else. And I kind of feel like Paige has that same mentality where it's hard for her to care as much about the events week in, week out than it is to get that major record. And so I think she kind of has this, and I think there's a lot of behind the scenes personal stuff with her as well. Finding, buying a house, getting married, all these things that she's done now.
Yeah.
And finding a little bit, I know she's always had a kind of contentious relationship with her family, with her dad. And this, I think they're in a good place. And I think that maybe just took a little bit of the drive out of her. And I think she needs to find a different chip on her shoulder, as I feel like a lot of athletes do.
It's that, or just maybe finding like that like mental health balance, right? Because I know obviously last year she had like the whole like Hawaii thing and like doing the off season in Hawaii, almost bought property there, and she got recharged. Like she used the off season to recharge her mentality, to rest, to kind of get back. And what happens? She hits the ground running. Right, she takes second at Vegas. She winds up winning back-to-back events at Texas State in the Champions Cup, winning the first major of the year. But then it's like when the drag of the season kind of starts coming around, that's when it felt like that recharge that she got during the off season, like she kind of ran through that, and then it kind of got to the nitty gritty of like the grind of the season, and you wonder if that plays into it. And so that kind of leads me to believe that she probably could have another strong start. Not to mention that there are some people who are injured. Like, isn't Kristen sidelined for a bit? Like, she's going to have a later start to the season.
Yeah, Tatar won't be. I don't think she's coming over until after Waco, I think.
Yeah, so
after the Texas swing.
Some people are going to get some head starts, is kind of what I'm getting at, before Kristen gets back into the swing of things.
I can't wait, because I know we're all media and we all talk about this, and I try to keep Terry and I in general. It's not our purview, like the whole sports radio kind of talk. There are other podcasts that do that way better than we do, I feel. But there's going to be a swell of talk that if Paige Pierce comes out hot this season, all the talk is going to be, look at how well Paige does when Kristen Tatar isn't there.
Right.
Even if Paige Pierce comes out and shoots 10-20 golf and would have blown Kristen Tatar out of the water, it doesn't matter. There's going to be that talk that Paige can only win when Tatar isn't there. And until we get them both heads up, it's just that noise is going to be there.
And that's a fair opinion to have, right? Like, it's fair to be like, is like what happens when they get back head to head again? Like, that is going to be an interesting story.
Yep.
And that kind of goes back to like the drive for Paige. Like, is the fact like, okay, so going into last year, before Kristen like hit her run where she was just podium everything and she was winning a bunch. Again, the year started with Paige with back-to-back wins and grabbing the first major. So at that point in time, Paige was still considered the best FPO player in the world. It wasn't until much later in the year, after Tatar just had a record-breaking year, basically, in all senses, wins, money, you name it. This is the first time where Paige is going into a year where she's not considered the best player in FPO, like at least for a long time. Like, she has been considered the GOAT of FPO by a lot of people for a very long time. And I do wonder if is that fire for her, that like she's coming into this year like not like in that role, like she's kind of coming in like not as a dark horse by any means, she's still a favorite, like, but she's not considered number one right now.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you're right. Everybody looks at her as number 2 in the world right now. And my slightly hot take is that Paige Pierce is still a better player at the top of her game than Tatar is. If they're both playing, we'll just say their best games, I will take Paige Pierce. The problem is Paige Pierce hasn't hit the top of her game in a while, and
that's a
Tatar
tough one.
is so consistent. Like Tatar is like an A all the time. Paige Pierce is like a B, an A plus, a B minus. C? Like, just Paige Pierce has more distance. Paige Pierce has a better long putt. Paige Pierce does not have the forehand that Tatar has, though. That is where Kristen.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, who's the more versatile player in your opinion, though? Because I think that's Tatar.
That's Tatar. Yeah, Tatar's more versatile. Like, I think you could put Tatar in almost any location, and she'll find a solid way to get out. She has a shot for almost everything. I don't believe Paige has that, but I think
like it's obvious that Paige has more distance.
Yep.
The putting one is debatable at this point if you're just looking at current form from last year. Like, maybe in the clutch you still trust Paige more, but like
no, honestly I don't.
Sets,
no, hell no.
Okay.
In the clutch,
so the other way.
I trust Tatar in the clutch. Like, you give someone Paige has a blaring weakness, and I've said it for years. Her weakness is 100 feet, and I see it because I see it in me. It's the same weakness I have. It's too far for like almost like. Maybe it's a little further than that. We'll say 130 feet. It's almost too far for a jump putt, but you have this weird throw that you can't put everything into it. And if Paige, again, if you've listened to the podcast, I've said it for years, Paige has a problem dialing down. She has a problem. If she's not going all out, her release point, her consistency isn't there. Like, just, you saw it at Worlds when she lost to Katrina. She had an easy up and down, but it was right in that spot that just wrecks her, where you have to have a little bit of touch. You have to have it. And she doesn't have that. She just, if there's a tiny part of Paige Pierce's game that's missing, and that's it right there, that spot. And it bit her hard that 2 years ago. Like,
yeah, I would just say this. Like, I think that we agree that Tatar's the more versatile player. We both agree, obviously, Paige has the distance. We both agree that Tatar has the forehand that Paige clearly lacks. I think their putting is pretty similar, man. Like, I don't know that like I can really just say like outright this person's a better putter than the other. Like, I think their circle 1 and circle 2 percentages are like pretty close.
Yeah, I would take Tatar.
But you can also go accuracy argument too.
Yeah, I would take Tatar in circle 1, but I would take Paige in circle 2.
That's probably fair.
If I like, and they're close, but if I had,
but you're taking Tatar on hitting fairways too. I think like she's definitely the more accurate player, and that probably is because she has more options to go to as far as what type of throw she can do to be in the fairway.
Yep.
So I think like I'm just saying, I think it's debate. I think it's more debatable than you're saying about Paige being the clear cut, like higher ceiling or.
I would never say clear cut. I just again, my opinion is that at the top of their games, I think Paige wins. If you're looking at almost a mistake, it's hard to say mistake free because they're probably going to shoot the exact same thing. But when you are looking at someone who is in their quote unquote beast mode, I think Paige just edges her out a little bit. But if you're going to ask me who's going to finish in the top 5 more this year, I'm going to say Tatar all day long. Like, I just think that it's again, Paige's top gear is I think it's just a touch higher than Tatar's. I have never, and maybe it's just her culture or European, I've never seen Tatar, maybe she never has had to. I've never seen her have to kick into that gear. I've never seen her upset. I've never seen her drive. Like, she doesn't look like she has a passion, so to speak, a Nico style. Like, she doesn't get super excited on the course. I've seen Paige.
She's a cold-blooded killer. That's
she is. She's
cold, man. And listen, here's the thing.
I wouldn't want to go up against her. Hell no. Tatar is and that's maybe
and
part
look,
of it.
She did all this last year while injured, by the way. Like, people don't factor that in enough. Like, we don't. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how injured she was, but
exactly,
like,
I don't know how
she
injured
clearly
she was.
had something going on because she clearly had to have surgery this offseason. So we know that she took time off last year due to the elbow. She apparently got it to some point where it was okay to keep playing. It wouldn't do any further damage. I couldn't really like get the real translation there of like what that meant. But the point is she wasn't even theoretically 100% last year and still did what she did. So that's grit, in my opinion.
Yeah,
maybe
I don't know.
Maybe not like the fiery expression of passion.
Correct.
But she definitely has the grit.
Like, yeah, she has the drive. Opinion. She definitely has the drive to win. I mean, it just goes and shows you that based on how she did last year. And again, maybe it's a cultural thing that I'm so used to seeing American players who get feisty, who get like visibly angry. And I've watched Paul, more than a handful of putters have lost their lives to Paul Macbeth folding them, just into quads. Just I watch them fold them up and they're done. Okay, see you later, putter. I guess nobody wanted that putter. And so maybe it's a slightly different thing overseas where you just don't see that sort of enthusiasm for your game or how you feel like you should be shooting. But again, maybe she didn't have to because she was always in it. Let me see a Kristen Tatar who's in 6th place going into a final round or 7th place and see if she has that or when things aren't going her way, because it didn't seem like that happened very often last year. To her credit, things went her way because she played very well.
Fair point.
Amazing. It's either way. We're going to see some really great play from, I'm hoping, Paige Pierce, Kristen Tatar when she finally shows up, the other 2 Europeans, Henna and Evelina. I mean, we can't forget about Katrina Allen, who's still at the top of her game, and probably Katrina is probably in better shape than any of them. Even I know Tatar's been working out quite a bit, but we know that Katrina Allen's a gym rat. She's proven it. And she's in better shape than most of the men on tour. She's in better shape than I think every woman on tour, other than maybe Holland Hanley. But I think it's a different type of shape. Holland Hanley's more that power lifter, the strength training. Katrina Allen is probably a little bit more all around gym person, just general fitness.
To tie into that, there's so many names like in FPO that you feel like had the potential just to flip the switch and like be a big winner.
Yeah.
Like just to mention some names, Haley King is always someone that if like the stars align and if she's there and she's committed, she could win. Holland Handley and Valerie Mandujano have proven that they have that ability. Ella Hansen has that ability. I think Macy Vela Diaz, low key, is getting to a point where she's going to have that ability too potentially this next season. I think Maria Oliva is a fantastic athlete that has all of the skills to potentially run down a win if she could figure out the rest of her game.
Yeah,
so,
Maria's...
there's so many potentials. Like, there's so much potential in division is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, everyone talks about how the talent Maria Oliva has, and I don't disagree with it. She just can't seem to put it together. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's a concentration, if it's a focus thing. I mean, she she has a lot of skill. She throws a mile for the FPO field, and I just don't know why she's not in more contention. It feels like she is either in 5th place or 35th place.
Fair.
And I need to see more out of Marioliva before I can put any sort of enthusiasm behind her.
Yeah. I just think the potential that is in FPO for parity is huge.
I love Marioliva's socials. I think she's hilarious, and she's great. And I think she has a lot of potential, like you say. I just need to see a little bit more out of her before I can put
That's fair.
I can put a lot of faith in anything in any of her rounds. I would not pick her to podium right now. I wouldn't pick her to podium all year.
Right.
Like I if you told me 3rd place or better for every Pro Tour event, I would take the under.
Yeah.
So
it's just for me, like, if I look at the current UDIS World Rankings, I think every player in FPO in the top 15 could win an event.
Yeah.
Like, just like if I'm just thinking of raw potential. So like it's actually pretty crazy, like what could happen next year depending on like who shows up in form. I think there could be just a whirlwind of different winners from that division.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. Ray Zerhausen has a question, and I don't know. We'll talk. Maybe we'll talk about that in the after show. He's talking about a little bit about where do we see the sport going as far as gambling and betting on the Pro Tour, and what we need to think about for players. Are there any policies in esports about players and gambling? There's got to be.
Oh my goodness. We could open up Pandora's box here. Listen, there's been all kinds of problems with gambling in esports. We've gotten match fixing scandals in esports.
I vaguely remember that.
People boosting people's accounts for money and getting banned for doing that. Oh man, we got it all in esports as far as like how betting can go wrong. But with all of that said, while there has been a ton of shady gambling that's gone on in esports over the years, it started off with people gambling in-game items and then turned into like real money betting. And that was a really crazy one because it's like there was no age restriction on someone betting an in-game cosmetic on a match and then translating that into money on some marketplace somewhere. So anyway, that is a big can of worms. But there is legitimate betting in esports as well, sure. Like there are like legit ways that you can bet. Obviously, it's the same type of thing with any other sports betting. It's maybe region locked or age restricted, or certain countries can do it, certain states in the US can or cannot. They follow very much the same guidelines as any other thing. But there's also some shady stuff going on in esports with gambling still to this day.
Yeah, I can only imagine with, when it comes to like digital goods and just in general, you've got things such as, cryptocurrencies and all that other crazy stuff that that the gambling can only be whatever. And I see, here's what I know. I know the Disc Golf Pro Tour is investigating getting into some sort of gambling, not this year, but maybe next year. And I don't know what that all entails. I don't know if that means talking to Vegas and getting it on the books. I don't know if that is something, if they're working with a company like Prize Picks, who does a little bit of that stuff, over-unders, basically a bunch of parlays. But I do think that if it's not already out there, that the Pro Tour does need to, as Ray had been asking, look at the players and probably have them sign something. As far as I don't know what the best way to put this is. Some sort of ethics in playing, because we could see, it would be difficult it'd be easy to throw matches in disc golf.
Yes.
You could easily do that.
Throw a stroke or two.
Yeah, stroke or two. And on top of that, I've put a lot of thought into this lately, obviously with Skip Ace and a lot of things, but getting gambling into disc golf is going to be difficult. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, the statistics. We currently rely on volunteers to get all of our UDisc statistics. Circle one putts, because if you're bringing gambling in, you're bringing in every sort of over under you can imagine. Is, if I am a volunteer and I'm scoring, we'll just say Paul Macbeth on the 5th card. Well, we won't use Paul because he's always covered on camera. Chris Dickerson on the 5th card. What's not to say that I don't maybe make a side bet as the scorer to say, how many circle 2 putts is Chris going to hit this week? I can maybe pad that stat when they're close, because what's Chris going to say if he's sitting at a 30-footer and I mark that as a circle 2 putt? Hey, I can hit the over on that. And if it's not on camera, how many gambling books do you know that will rely on more or less word of mouth? A volunteer getting all these statistics. I think we're gonna have some issues with sports betting in that aspect. I don't see a problem with overall score. Like if you're gonna bet on winners, losers, parlays, kind of like what Prize Picks does. I don't see a problem. Or if we're gonna get into things like a FanDuel where you're just competing against other players for certain things. Where you pick a team and whatnot. I see that as working out. But when you start getting into individual gambling on individual players, we're going to have some issues. And the second thing you're going to run into is, if you're the Pro Tour, is how do you monetize that? Because I'll say right now, the Pro Tour will have to monetize that through UDisc. Because who's the only company that has all those stats?
Right.
That's UDisc. And there's a reason. There's a reason they have that. There's a reason they're keeping that. The Pro Tour is going to either have to come up with their own scoring system, similar to UDisc. They're going to have to either lean on the PDGA to enhance their live scoring, or going to have to sign something with UDisc that say that they get a cut as well as UDisc, because everyone's going to have to go to UDisc for these stats, which is a big reason I think UDisc is continuing to do the stats, because they see a possible monetary future line to be the Elias Sports of disc golf.
Yeah. So kind of my take on it is I think anything outside of overall score and placement is like too risky to have any sort of betting going on because of what you've all said. Like, you don't know like how well these stats are being collected, how accurate they are, potential chances that it can be tampered with because it's volunteer based. Even if it's paid employees, you still have to worry about that sort of thing. Like, the stats aren't like auto generated. There are people out there logging it. Like, it's not built in like in a system that's easy to follow, like the traditional sport like basketball or football or whatever the case may be, to try to get like those accurate numbers. So that's a big problem right there. And here's the other problem. This is the problem we ran into in esports, is you run into a situation at a certain point where players can make more money throwing than they will doing well. And like where purses are at right now in disc golf on average, I mean, again, there's some outlier events out there that have huge money attached to it, but on average, if you're a, let's say, guy that rides kind of the bottom to middle of the cash line, and so maybe you're getting a few $100s an event, what stops you from throwing to get way more money? Like, if you're involved in some type of like throwing for money scheme with a betting service, especially when it's in its infancy, and so maybe things not all fleshed out policy wise and legality wise. And there isn't protections in place to investigate things yet. Like, you can run into a situation where, unfortunately, like, the prize money isn't high enough to deter people from doing that sort of thing. If anything, it motivates them. And that's what's happened in esports, is that you were having semi-pro teams were the biggest ones that were guilty of this, where, like, they weren't going to win the tournament. They weren't going to, like, make a bunch of money, but they could throw a game and make a bunch of money. And then that's where I worry a little bit about disc golf, is just like where the money's at, and like what potential money can be made in a schemey system, like if things go that way. So that's something you really have to think about, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely going to have to be, and it's going to be so hard to, I would love to know how golf takes care of it, because it's going to be so hard to monitor if we get into this aspect where you will be able to bet on individual players. Right. Or
because the top guys are making enough money where like they would never risk it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense for those top.
If you're bottom of the cash line guy, it's a different story all of a sudden.
Yeah, there's going to be temptations, that's for certain. And so yes, Ray, that's kind of my take on the gambling in the sport. I believe that there is room for some gambling. I believe that there will be it's going to happen inevitably. Like I said, I hope at some point Skip Base gets to that point where we can either spin off or have our own kind of FanDuel-ish type aspect where you can, put, and guess what? It's you and 50 other people. You all put in $1 and top half cash or top third or whatever it is, just that type of mentality. I don't personally ever want to get into, I guess considered sports books where, where you're betting on props, which is, your circle putts and this and that. I don't know where we're going to be until we can get cameras all over the course. Mm-hmm. And even then, it's a little more difficult because, like I said, if you're starting to get those props, man, there's going to be a lot more influence on players until we get a full paid staff that does stats exclusively. Until we have a team of 20 people that are traveling tour to tour and doing this full time. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to be done. I'm sure it's been inspected. I'm sure there are things I'm not thinking of. And when I say the Pro Tour is going to get into some sort of sports betting and gambling or whatnot, it's been talked about for years. I just know that it's on the agenda for 2024, I think, to actually maybe look into it more. And I don't even know what that means. That might not come to fruition for another 2 to 3 years.
Of course. And here's the thing, like, if you're Disc Golf Pro Tour, like, the end game is non-endemic sponsorships.
Yes.
Like, that is, like, the name of the game to, like, grow the sport even more, to, like, bump everything up. And guess what one of the biggest non-endemic sponsorships you can get is? And that is some types of sports book, some type of gambling. It's either that or, like, a cellular service or a credit card company or, you have to, like, start thinking about those types of things. And gambling is definitely one of the ones that comes up right away. And it's, like, one of the most natural ones as far as, like, like a symbiotic relationship where both parties are going to benefit in some sort of way. But like you, I think you've hit the nail on the head a lot. It's just like when it comes to prop betting, super scary. We don't have a way to make sure we're getting accurate stats for all of that. And then again, you got to think about prize purse sizes and like how far down the line are you going to allow betting to occur where you don't run into risky situations like that. So yeah, like I do think it's only natural that it'll happen at some point though. And fantasy is probably the safest way.
Yeah, I think fantasy or DFS or whatever you want to call it, I think is the safest way to go about doing what we're going to be at some point doing in the next few years, whether that's through, like I said, a service like Skip Ace or one of the other major, huge services that will think. Because there's a gentleman, I know I told this story a few years ago, that is part of a different community for a comedy podcast, and he actually does the books in Vegas for one of the hotels. And I reached out to him years ago and I said, hey, what does it take to get, or what would it take to get disc golf on the books, to actually be able to have lines? And he had said it would take years of data as well as a consistent tour. Because at the time, I think the Pro Tour was only maybe 3 years old. So that they can look at, hey, this course plays this for this type of player. So we know how to put lines on these guys. We know where it's going to be. We know, we can adjust for this and that. And he basically said it would require a ton of data that I don't even know if we currently collect, but with the combination of UDisc and StatMando and the Pro Tour and all these other things, we're slowly getting there. It's just a matter of time. How does, take this year or we'll just say next year, if there's a new spot on tour, a new course, how does a bookie judge that? We saw Prize Picks just flail and miss hard on a few of the new courses for that first round, and then taking into account weather and whatnot. And some of us made some decent cash doing that, betting against the numbers at Prize Picks. So we'll see how it goes in the future. I hope we continue to progress. I think it can bring in a lot of external money. All right, Dust, I think we're going to call it for the regular show tonight. We'll come back here for an after show. So if you have any questions or anything, please, by all means, post them to the board. And this can be anything related to disc golf or not. We've got a different voice on the podcast. So if you have any questions that maybe Dust can answer, I think I asked him this question before, but I got a different question for him I got the same question for him, but we'll talk about it in the after show. So, anyway, thanks to Dust for jumping in here when my regular co-host abandons us over in Koh Samui. I think that's where he's at right now. This has been podcast episode 441 of the Smashbox TV. Stick with us, and we'll be back in just a few minutes for our after show. Have a good night, guys, and we'll see you soon. Thank you to our $2 and above patrons. Your name is listed below in the credits. If you are interested in being listed as a producer in the Smashbox TV credits and supporting this and other fine podcasts, please visit patreon.com/SmashboxTV. Hello, everyone, and welcome to podcast episode 441's After Show.
I tried. I did. Try.
It's hard. It's hard via Skype or this. So
I think I was close.
You were close. That was fine. Yeah.
You held the note a little longer than I
did. I knew you didn't come in on time, and I wasn't sure if you were going to, so I held it longer, thinking, he might come in. There's a little bit of a delay, so we'll get that going. I've got a question for you, but I want to put it just on the back burner real quick while I've seen something recently, and someone brought it up on the board. Maybe it was Ray again, about RFID chips in discs. And while I think it's a really good idea, and I think it could add some cool data analysis, I haven't seen a good way to do it yet. I've been racking my brain as to how that could be implemented, because I've thrown a disc or two that has one of the early ones. I think it was at DDO in like 2016 or something. One of the LAT 64 guys, I believe, brought one over, an early prototype, and it had a little. At the time, it was maybe twice the size of a quarter, and it was stuck in the very center of the disc. It added a few grams to the disc and threw it. It was fun. It kept track of a little bit of statistics, but nothing ever came of it. And we've seen a few other companies now. I think I saw something on Reddit, just someone posting about, hey, do you think we can do this, blah, blah, blah. And here's the problem we have. One is the cost, because those chips aren't cheap. I think you can probably get them down to $5, $10, $15 maybe for one of those chips. But
per
still,
chip?
I would assume for a unit, yeah. I mean, you could probably, I bet you could probably create something for like in the $10 range.
That ain't it then. Like if you're having to pass those out to like people with 30 discs in their bag.
Yeah. I mean,
there's no way.
And I mean, if you think about it, you probably only need them for your drivers in general, unless you want to collect statistics and analytics on your putts. Like, hey, I'm a spin putter, whatever. But you're right. Like that's going to be tough. The second of all is, how do you attach them? Because anywhere you attach them is going to throw the weight distribution off, even just a little bit. Whether people notice or not, it's going to. So my thought was, and it would
have to be a part of the actual process of making the disc, I feel like.
Well, I feel like
on afterwards.
Yeah, you would need like a standard. And I was thinking like something the size of like a large pill that you'd have to take for some horse pill or something you'd have to take. And then you'd have to have a spot maybe in the rim of your disc that you could just slide it and pop it in. And that's where it would go, so that it was still smooth on the disc. You could find a way to get it out. It wouldn't interfere with the flight, and it would have to be within probably a gram or two so that it doesn't affect too much of the weight of the disc, that it would just kind of slide into the rim. But even then, you'd have to look at, some discs have different rim styles and how, the size of each rim and the angle and the flight plate and all this other stuff. You're right in that it would have to be part of the disc. So I think what you'd almost have to do is either have an after mod where you could pop them in, or they'd have to be put in at the factory. And if you put them in at the factory, you're immediately probably doubling or tripling the cost of your disc. So the way I could see it working is if someone came up with one of these and worked with a manufacturer to make a line of discs that maybe you don't use for actual play. I mean, you could, but I don't know why you'd want to throw necessarily your $40 or $50 disc, but you used it as a practice disc. This is one, hey, I got one destroyer with this in it, and I'm going to learn everything I can about how I throw my destroyer, the angle I release it on, the speed, the spin, the distance, and that is your practice disc. Maybe you get one with a destroyer, we'll just use Innova molds, a rock, and an AVR. And so you can kind of generally do something like that. I can't imagine this being used as a disc finding device. I can't imagine it being used until we can literally get these things down to the thickness and weight of a piece of tape.
Yeah, like an adhesive. Yeah.
An adhesive, more or less. And even then, you need probably some sort of PDGA rule, because I believe I don't think you can add something like that to a PDGA approved disc for a tournament. You can't have tape or anything. We play glow, and you put glow tape on it and stuff, but those aren't sanctioned events. So I don't know if we'll ever truly see anything like that for retrieval or anything like that. The only way I see this happening is a company comes out with like I said, a practice disc that matches the mold of something. And you can use that to gather information about your particular throwing. How fast is your arm speed and things like that. But I don't see this ever being a general purpose add-on to any disc type of situation, at least in the near-term future.
No. And it's certainly not a solution for like data gathering on the Pro Tour on the course. Like that is probably more of like having some type of like crazy camera scanning technology that somehow can like map out the entire course and know exactly where a disc is located on the course at any given point in time. Like you're probably going that route before you're going chip and disc like individually and trying to track them all over the place.
Yeah, and then obviously, as someone mentions, you have to think about charging and whatnot. Like how do you recharge these? Because I think the one that I had played with from Latitude many years ago was a micro USB at the time, and you just plug it in. It would take a couple hours to charge up, and then it'd be good for the day, or 4, 5, 6 hours or whatever. You turn it on, you turn it off, you sync it to your phone, and you do whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there is room. Somebody could do it, but like I said, I see it more as some sort of device to help players or people become a better
right. It would be a training
tool golfer. It's a training tool.
Yeah.
So
sure I can see that.
Off of disc golf related content, I think I asked you this before. You do commentating for Valorant. What's the next? Because Valorant to me seems like it came out of nowhere, but I don't pay attention to again, I don't pay attention to anything thing. For me, it was always the esports were Overwatch, League of Legends, Counter-Strike. Those were kind of the big ones. And then you've got your, Hearthstone kind of card game stuff. But I'd never heard of Valorant until I think I heard you talk about it. And I'm sure it's something that you had seen coming for a while. What's the next third-party shooter or first-person shooter that's going to make a splash in the esports, do you think? Is there one that's on the horizon? Is there one that like people are looking forward to? Like, oh man, I really want. I don't know if I know there's Modern Warfare, but I don't know if it's played competitively. Not really. But
Well, I mean, Call of Duty is played competitively, and they just update to whatever the newest version of Call of Duty is every year. So that's just kind of like a constant in that sense. Like, it's Call of Duty Esports, and it's just whatever COD is out that year.
Sure.
So that doesn't really count in that regard because you kind of always know a new COD's coming every single year, and everything just kind of adjusts accordingly. So that's all kind of one thing. Valorant was. Like from the inside perspective, it wasn't necessarily an out of nowhere play. Yeah. It was something where like Riot started hiring people to work on a secret project, and the people that they were hiring were FPS people, so everyone kind of knew clearly they're working on some type of FPS. And then stuff kind of started coming out here and there, like trailers, and like they did a pretty good job about like kind of like vamping up like towards the release of the beta, like, hey, we got this thing. And it was very clear what they were targeting. They were targeting tactical FPS players that like Counter-Strike, or then maybe they enjoyed some elements of a game like Overwatch, but they wanted more FPS and less like Overwatch, like alt combos all day long, and that be the way that the game gets determined. Like they want it to be more FPS focused as opposed to like Overwatch, which I think went a little bit more the opposite direction, where it was a little bit more heavy on like the MOBA elements, like abilities and skills and ultimates and things of that nature. Rainbow Six is probably like another good example of a game that went the route of like having a more shooter focus, but still having like all these abilities and gadgets and things like that made it still like more of a hardcore FPS. So Valorant was like perfect in the sense that it attracted people from both the Counter-Strike world and maybe people from like Overwatch that wanted something a little bit different. Like like Overwatch almost went a little too far in like the different abilities that characters could do and stuff like that. And Valorant was like Valorant's kind of like a perfect balance because a lot of the abilities in the game are just mimicking like what utility in Counter-Strike would do. So like just to give an example for people who are like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? It's like ability, like let's say a smoke grenade. We all know what that is. It's a grenade you throw on the ground and blooms smoke and it blocks people's vision. So Valorant just basically gave characters certain abilities that mimicked what a smoke grenade would do. So like the abilities weren't like these crazy things that like completely changed the game. They were like pretty basic tools to use to help you play the game. So that's kind of like where Valorant comes from. That's why I think it got so popular. And although I do think it's more popular than people expected it was going to be.
Sure.
Like it's definitely, I think Valorant's ahead of schedule as far as like the viewership it gets, the player base it has. I think it happened a little bit quicker than people thought it would. But I think a lot of that was also due to people discontent with Counter-Strike because it was just so stale. Like Valve was just kind of like hands off, not really involved very much. You rarely hear from them. Like a lot of Counter-Strike is due to the grassroots people who play the game and love the game, and the people within like the tournament ecosystem that kind of drive that game. Whereas Valorant is very much, Riot is very hands-on. They do update the game regularly. And so people kind of take that as, oh, they care about this game. Whereas Valve like is just like basically Counter-Strike is viewed as like the redheaded stepchild of Steam because they care about Dota 2. Like that's like the big thing for Valve is Dota 2, and it's just like Counter-Strike's like the kid crying in the closet or something like that, like in Harry Potter. But to get back to your question of like what's the next one, nothing on the horizon that I've seen.
No, nothing.
Not at all.
Nothing. Rumors or people.
I would guess.
Company.
I would guess at some point a new version of Counter-Strike gets released, because if you just like kind of look at the timeline of it, I think Counter-Strike Source came out in 2006. I believe the Counter-Strike before that was like 1999 or 2000. And then CSGO came out in 2012. So they're way past like the timeline of the
10
past.
years.
Yeah, so they've been going at it pretty hard. So I could see like a new version of Counter-Strike coming out, especially because the big thing, like if you're like super into gaming, with Valve is like the next Source engine, like Source 2 is the name of the engine. And that's kind of like they had already kind of pushed Dota 2 to Source 2. Like some of the new aspects of that game are because it's Source 2 driven. So I know that there's like been this big push to like push Counter-Strike to this new engine called Source 2, whatever the heck it is. So I could see like a new version of Counter-Strike before I could sell like a whole brand new franchise or something like that coming into space.
I just didn't know if there was anything coming down the pipe that people, that aren't in the esports world maybe are getting excited for, or rumors, I don't know. I'll just throw it like Bungie is creating something that everyone's excited for, or they think that someone's coming out for. I know there's talks right now that GoldenEye has just been released, the classic GoldenEye for
It
N16.
has been, yes.
It's been re-released in the last couple weeks for
Right.
For a lot of different platforms. And as I was joking, I've got it on my arcade machine in the other room I just built, so it's great.
Yeah, I imagine like maybe just some new genre of game would be like the future of esports, as opposed to like just some brand new first-person shooter out of nowhere. Like, it feels like the FPS space is kind of like pretty well accounted for in esports between Counter-Strike, Rainbow Six, Valorant, and Overwatch barely hanging on by a thread at this point. Like, that game is pretty dead, honestly. I use that word like the loosest sense. Like, people say a game's dead just because like it's stagnating, like the player base is dropping. It's not that it's actually literally dead. But Overwatch just like really screwed themselves, I think, with how they started their whole esports ecosystem. Like, the way that esports have always succeeded in the past is usually grassroots driven, community driven, and then the developer just gets on board and supports it. Whereas like Overwatch tried to force the issue.
It was built to be a platform almost. I remember
and they were demanding millions of dollars from people up front to like have franchise slots. And so, I mean, so much cash got injected into that. And then Twitch spent, it was like $90 million. What was it? It was some ludicrous number to like get exclusive streaming rights of the Overwatch League.
Yeah.
For no reason at all, because there was no competition. Really, like, not really, like there was competition, but the competition was never going to be up to the same standard as Twitch. So Twitch basically paid for something they could have easily gotten for free.
Well, I think there was a chance that it was going to go to YouTube or something. Like, that
it was MLG TV was the one. So
okay.
MLG used to have their own like streaming service, and so that and obviously like Blizzard and MLG. I think Blizzard eventually bought MLG. So that was the route it could have gone, and Twitch was like, no, we want this, and they spent it. YouTube, I think, maybe could have been. But yeah, like, so much money got wasted in Overwatch, it's ridiculous.
It's interesting. I'd be curious what the next genre, because I know I've watched I don't pay too much attention to first-person shooters. I got a little bit into Hearthstone for a while. I'm playing more Marvel Snap now with my kid.
I am also a Marvel Snapper.
Yeah, it's fun, but I don't see it yet as a competitive. I don't think there's enough variety for it to be a competitive league yet. I'm sure
something. I'm sure
there'll be something at some point. I just don't see it as, it feels
because
really
mobile gaming in general
casual.
Has become way more a part of the esports space recently. I think PUBG Mobile was like really the biggest one.
Oh, was it? Okay.
But like mobile gaming, like we all used to kind of laugh at the idea of like mobile gaming being an esport. Like, that's not real gaming. That's some dude playing on his phone. But like, actually, mobile gaming has like become a pretty substantial piece of the esports puzzle, particularly in Asia, in India. So yeah, and then VR has always been kind of like this fringe thing that has some esports aspects to it, but like obviously it's still like not like affordable enough and practical enough to like really spread to like a big population. And whether or not that day ever comes, I have no idea. So yeah, like esports is hard to project. I think everyone's just trying to stay alive at this point. Everyone's just trying not to go bankrupt is basically like the big goal of esports right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. With all the money that goes in to these developers to develop these games, that the competition, I mean, because I'm not worried ever that Riot is going to go out of business or anything like that, but the fact that the competitive scene might, you never know. And is it going to go back?
I mean, the problem is like everyone's making money except for the people that are running the show.
Sure.
So all the players are making tons of money. Like maybe certain staff members are making money, but the venture capital that funded all that's not getting a return on their investment right now. It's very much like the only way you make money in esports, if you're on the business side, like not if you're a player, you just get a salary, like staff get salaries, all that jazz. But like if you're like up at the top and you're trying to make money, the only way that you make money is by selling. what's happened a lot. Like a lot of
Sure.
companies are selling to just kind of some shady places in certain regions of the world that might also be affiliated with like other like traditional sports that just recently happened. So you get what I'm getting at. Like there's a lot of reliance on selling it off, like building up something, acquiring as much as you can under your umbrella, and then selling it off to somebody. Is like really the way that people are making money more often than not in esports if you're like on the business side of it.
Interesting times. I'm curious as to what we're gonna see from not just esports but disc golf as well. Obviously, on the online arena and where that goes and what we have coming up with. I know we talked about it last week a little bit. We've got, this is the final year for the Jomez contract. We've got post-production stuff. What's going to happen after that? I don't think Jomez is going anywhere personally. I think that they're covering MPO and FPO now, which is great. And we're going to see way more coverage. So
that was an interesting one. That was a big switch between like, GK Pro obviously being the FPO people prior to that, and now them just focusing on skins, and kind of wondering who made that move. Are people happy with it or not happy with it? Who kind of kickstarted it all? Like that one's an interesting one from the outside perspective.
Yeah, I don't think GK Pro is too sad to see FPO go, because again, I've heard behind the scenes that you're not making money on FPO. It's just, unfortunately, the money's just not there because the views aren't there for most of these companies. You already the way that Jomez is going to be able to make money off FPO is that they already have the user base where they're going to be able to get the 70, 80, 90,000 views on these videos, which will still be a large fraction of their MPO views, as opposed to an outfit like GK, where you're sitting with, I don't know, maybe 100,000 subscribers, and most of those are probably gathered because of skins. Most of them probably don't care about the FPO coverage. So they're getting anywhere from 7 to maybe 40,000 views. 7,000. I think I saw one that had 7,000 views on one of the early rounds, and then you've got some of the big ones at 40, 50, 60,000 views. So that just, they weren't making, I don't believe they were making enough money in order to make it worthwhile for the time that they were putting in for GK.
Yeah,
so
I'm not sure. It's still a huge like fraction of your content that you're no longer going to have, though.
It is. I think that's going to be the tough part, in that, you're going to go, and I don't know what GK's plan is, but you're going to go from having, 8, 9, 10 videos a week between all of your, 3 rounds, probably 2 9s for each one. So that's 6 plus a skins plus probably a highlight, to just the skins. And clearly they'll probably put out more different coverage of some sort. But I mean, that cuts your channel down. And it's funny because, Jomez has been able to build up their viewer base because they've always had the lead MPO card. So it's like it's an avalanche. It starts small, but it's always going downhill. And as long as they continue to have that primary lead card, they will continue to get subs. It's always been that way, and so they've always been able to do that. And
you do feel like these companies do see the writing on the wall, though, because everyone's starting to diversify their content. Everyone is. Jomez obviously has like putting game, and they have like the stuff that they're doing with Simon Lizotte right now. The name of that show escapes me, but like 2 episodes are out right now. Beyond Disc Golf, is it called? I think
it's Beyond Disc Golf.
Something like that. They have other content out as well. They even had like a podcast that they were doing for a bit, like during the off season. Obviously, GK Pro went the skins route. I know Gatekeeper went the route of just like working with Ricky and doing a bunch of like stuff with him. I think they had like it was like something where he would like play everything's a par 3 like handicap match against somebody, and they would film that. So like everyone's diversifying their content because I think they all know secretly, like deep down, one day like they're not going to have the tournament coverage anymore, and so to survive they need to either have some type of contract with the Pro Tour where they become like a white label where everything that they do just gets put underneath the DGN banner, And so it's no longer your brand out there anymore. You're basically getting paid to provide a service, and you're like white labeling, or you're having to put out some type of different content, whether that be some of the stuff we're already seeing people develop, whether that be more like news coverage type stuff, whether it be some type of side content alongside the event somehow. I think like we can kind of clearly see the progression of like where things are headed, because I do think that like one day surely the Disc Golf Pro Tour will want everything underneath their umbrella in one way or another, whether it's Jomez white labeling it or whether it like somehow eventually it all gets underneath EGN. Surely. And
I've said this for years, it's interesting because Jomez has, I mean, they've got great production quality, but I don't feel that their production quality is so much better than everybody else's. If you look at Gatekeeper or GK as far as the camera work, or even Disc Golf Network, the guys that do the live stuff, a lot of that stuff, these guys are all experienced cameramen. In fact, the Jomez crew might be the least experienced at this point because they've had turnover, they've hired new people, they've expanded so much. The original crew that was doing that is on the sideline now. Jonathan, comes in and does whatever. I'm sure he's involved in a lot of the other projects they do, but you've got Joey Tamale doing camera work and guys I don't even know their names, as opposed to Jerry and Michael and Jonathan, who were they did it and everything. So they're all good cameramen, everybody. Jomez has a slightly better production as far as their graphics go.
Yeah, that's the big thing. They always push their graphics every year to like do stuff like Flight Pass and other things.
They've been a little stale the last, I'd say, year or so as far as their graphics. They did add the overhead whole preview stuff, which I thought was really nice this past year. I thought that was a nice addition to it.
There's always something every year that they add.
There definitely is.
Which keeps them ahead of the game because virtually no one's adding anything anywhere else.
Yeah, and obviously, so you've got that. I mean, their follow flight, anyone can do it. It's just a matter of putting in the time. I personally don't get that much excitement out of follow flights. I know some people do. I think they do a lot of other things much better. And then you've got the one of the main reasons that everybody loves them is their commentary team.
It's the culture.
It's the culture and the commentary,
like their brand. Yeah.
It's the Jomez brand. So I'm curious to see how that translates over to FPO. Are they going to be able to find someone that meshes like a German Yuli? Because clearly German Yuli have a relationship. They've had a relationship for a long time, but they have a unique one. A lot of their stuff is inside jokes. It's razzing on each other. It's kind of, being amazed at this disc golf thing. And will the Jomez culture mesh with the FPO culture? I don't know. That's what I'm curious to see what happens. But I think you're right in that all these brands see it on the wall. Steve Dodge was way ahead of his time when he fired us and he fired the post-production crews, and he wanted to bring it all under his umbrella. I said at the time I thought it was the right move. He just went about it the worst way in the world, and
either you bring it all under your umbrella or you're selling broadcast rights for like high dollar amounts that makes it worth it to it not being under your umbrella.
Exactly.
And I know Jomez did spin in this situation, and so there was money exchanged, but I don't know if that holds up over time.
Yeah, I don't know what is the value. Has the value? I mean, last year they signed a 2-year contract for $500,000. That was the number.
Yeah.
So is it more valuable now? Is it less valuable now? I mean, because is post-production less valuable with live being more valuable? Does Jomez have a right to come out and say, cool, we'll do it for 2 more years, but we're only going to do it for $250,000? Because live is so much more valuable, does that push down the value of post-production? Or is because the sport's bigger now, is post-production even more valuable, and live has everything come up?
That's tough for me.
I don't know the answer. I don't know the value. I do know that the Pro Tour leaves a lot of money on the table by not bringing it all under their umbrella. I think that that they could, the 500, we'll just say $250,000 a year, they could easily make that back by hiring 2 editors and selling ads against those videos. They could make up that $250,000. The question is, do they want to put that effort in? Jomez does such a good job that you are right away running into an issue with either obviously the Jomez culture, the fans, if you cut them out. So that right away is going to leave a sour taste. And on top of that, you're taking on a lot of liability, so to speak, of now this is your responsibility. If you don't do it well, again, AKA Steve Dodge a couple years ago, you're going to get just demolished online, as Steve did, and semi-rightfully so. Like, when Steve came in and said, I want to bring this all under the Pro Tour umbrella, and we're going to do live on our own, we're going to do post-production on our own, again, I said it was the right move. I thought it was the best move for the tour at the time. He just did it horribly. It just the crew that he had, the PSP, great guys, but just put under the gun, and it just nothing worked out for them. It was you could not ask for a worse set of circumstances to domino down and eventually, crash on him, as we saw that it happened. But
I mean, as an outsider, disc golf has always been kind of interesting to me, like with this whole idea of live versus post-produced, because like obviously any other sport, there's no debate. It's live, right? Like any traditional sport, you're watching it live, or maybe you like record it if you couldn't watch it live. You come back home, you watch it later, or the case may be. But the problem is that disc golf has this long-standing culture of being a post-produced sport, for one, and then two, it lasts so long. Like, who wants to sit on their couch and watch like an 8-hour live broadcast and be there for the entire bit of it? At some point, you're going to cut it off, but you're going to want to catch up. And so you would love to have that post-produced content available to be able to do that, so that you can get through the content faster in a more reasonable amount of time, right? Like, it might take you a few hours, 3 hours to watch a basketball game. It take you 8 hours if you want to follow all the disc golf coverage. So like eventually having something that's more, I don't know, bite size is the right word, but something that's just easier to consume means that post-produce is always going to be a popular option within disc golf. It's the same thing for esports, by the way. Like, we essentially ask people to sit there and watch a tournament that runs for 8 to 12 hours long. And some people will tune into that live, but eventually people do tune out, I imagine, and they rely on the VODs to be able to see what they want to see if they didn't get to catch it live. And so you're going to always have that, like, I think, friction of live versus post-produce in disc golf. And I do think that there will always be a place for post-produce in disc golf, strictly just because of how long it lasts.
Yeah.
I think more than anything. Like, I think even the most diehard person can't stick around and watch the whole thing live.
It's funny because
it's just about who controls it.
We have post-produced, which I always consider, I feel like we have 3 genres of coverage in disc golf, and one is not even being used. There's live, the full live. There's post-production, which is a very nice, clean-cut, commentated version of of the event. And then there is what I used to do, I feel like, is for the live, which is the smash cut. You just take the live and you chop it up. Cool. This is what we did live. Here's where we cut out 99% of the commercials. Maybe you have an ad roll in, maybe 1 or 2 in the middle, and that's it. And you cut out everything. And you don't care about the funny haha commentary that you get from the Jomez or the FPO or whatever. You get the live commentary, but just chopped up. And it might be a little harsh at times to just cut somebody off when you want to go to the next shot. But that will catch. It's like a VOD. You'll get caught up. Here's blocks. Here's holes 1 through 4. Here's holes 5 through 7. Here's holes 10 through whatever. And you just chop that up. You throw it out there. That takes minimal time and effort, as opposed to a post-production effort, which can literally take 6 to 8 hours to produce for a good team like Jomez. They're bringing in the footage, they're editing it, they're putting on graphics, they're doing commentary, they're cleaning it up, and then they're releasing it on YouTube. Like, all that takes overnight. You take the recording, crazy. You chop it up, you squeeze it together, you re-render it, you ship it out as a video on demand, and it's got no extra commentary. To me, that's where this is eventually going to go. I think there will be a place for these really nice post-production rounds, but I feel like, we're spoiled in disc golf that we have them. Because if you watch like an NBA short game, it's just the live cut up. Congratulations. They don't get Jim Nansen to talk about or Marv Albert to come and talk about the 12-minute version of the NBA game you're watching on YouTube. They just cut up the live, man, and ship it out. And I think that's where we're eventually going to go. Because for me, again, I'm unique. Everybody has a different perspective. I don't care about post-production. If I want to catch up on a broadcast, I'll watch post-production, but I watch it at twice the speed with no commentary. It's all data in, data out. Just I don't care about what German Yuli or Madison and Erica Stinchcomb say about the players. I can see that myself. I'm going to get it in and out as fast as I can, and that's what I feel my smash cuts were, and that's what I think post-production will eventually go to on the Disc Golf Network. I think they could right now do that, have it out hours and hours before Jomez, put it behind the paywall, and just see what kind of viewership they get. I used to get decent viewership, especially from overseas, because these guys would wake up and it would be there. Cool. That's awesome. I can just watch this real quick and go. And, obviously no one is competing at that time. No one was competing with Jomez for the stuff, but I kind of feel like that's where it might go in the future. I don't know. That's, again, out of my purview of expertise now. But that's to me what makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think it's just like disc golf is this unique situation where the culture of how disc golf is consumed is so split.
It is.
And I don't know that there's another situation like that disc golf has, where it is that split half and half, like, and probably leaning more towards post-produced, if we're honest.
Yeah, it is still.
So I just don't know like another sport or another thing that has found themselves in this identical situation, and like how you eventually make a push in that live direction fully, and how you slowly transition it, how you kind of slowly work in that direction without like ticking your audience off, or like maybe even like, I don't want to say killing it, but like you might ruin it all. Like if you make the wrong move at the wrong time, you turn people off and it becomes like a huge problem rather than you like advancing and having a positive trajectory. Like, I don't know how you handle it all, honestly.
Yeah, it's good. It's going to take years.
People start losing jobs, money starts getting lost. Like, a lot of things happen there, and there could even be grudges held, or like, people. So it's a very fragile situation for sure. I mean, one thing is for sure, like, we want live to get better, and we want live to grow. We want live to be a major part of disc golf. I think that's like very clear. And I think most people, if you ask them, would probably say, yeah, we'd love to see live get better and grow, and like we're all for that, but we just don't want to lose post-produce. Like, we still want to have that option.
Yeah, I think there's going to be there, and here's obviously another option. We still do like what I said. You take the live, you cut it up, you put it behind the paywall, and post-produce still exists. It just exists on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and those post-produce rounds don't come out until a little later, because I've always had the feeling that, cool, we have these post-produced, that's great, but you're not entitled to them. You're not entitled to get this awesome coverage of some of the Disc Golf Pro Tour's event the next day at the expense of the Pro Tour. And I like the post-production because I think it does bring in casual viewers. But again, if you're a casual viewer, you're probably not you might not be tuning in the next day to see what happened the day before. And, do I want to lose post-production? No, because I think those guys do a great job. But I also think that there's no reason why it can't come out after the event and let the Pro Tour, sure, Jomez might lose 25% of their views, because there is going to be that portion that really does want it next day. They want to see what happened. They don't want to sit through the live. They don't want to wait and, go through the entire 4-hour round, but they really want to see what happens. Well, there's an option for you. There's the, there's the chopped up version. And if you want to wait to get the really nice produced version, you can wait till Monday, and that's, I think there is room for that type of aspect. And I hope that nobody, obviously, I hope that nobody loses their jobs. I want everyone to kind of continue to succeed, because right now we are in a kind of a huge, awesome growth period where there's more and more options for everybody. So, but we'll see, won't we? Is anything out on the board? Ray's been asking all sorts of questions tonight. Do we have anything else we want to chat about in our after show? What's your next disc golf thing? Dust, do you have anything lined up, or just in another podcast? You're going to kind of wait. Do you hope to do that as like a regular, or just kind of when you feel like there's a point for it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because like, to be like fully transparent, like I felt last year I was like moving very rapidly in a positive direction, like faster than I ever would have thought. Like basically within, because I mean, like when I knew I wanted to do disc golf stuff, I kind of reached out to everyone. I mean, as you would, right? Like, you got to play the game, you got to, put yourself out there, be persistent, like you got to be gung ho and like go for it. And so I did, and like luckily I kind of like struck gold pretty quickly doing the DGN stuff with the scramble show I was doing, thanks to Jamie Thomas, and obviously yourself helping me get involved with that. And then luckily, like, Gatekeeper decided to roll the dice on me. To be fair, they were kind of in a desperate situation at the time that they did roll the dice on me. It was like one of those things where it's like either we roll the dice on this guy or we have nobody. Because like I think what happened is like they last second got picked up to cover Belton, because they normally don't do Silver Series events. They normally just do the elite stuff. And I think something happened to where like they got asked to do Belton and they were not prepared for that, because Silver Series is not their thing. And so they're like, okay, like, yeah. And then they had to kind of scramble to put it together. And then eventually they reached out to me after, like, I mean, the last time I had talked to them before they hit me up for Belton was like many, many months. Like, we had an initial conversation. They didn't seem interested at all. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, hey, you want to come cast Belton for us real quick? So it was like a very, like, kind of rapid thing. But yeah, so I was very fortunate to kind of get the opportunities I got last year, and everything seemed like it was like heading in a pretty good direction. And then this year, like, everything, like, the bottom kind of fell out. Like, I'm not working with Gatekeeper anymore. My show got canned basically on DGN. And so it's like, I'm not sure what happens next. Like, I'm still like in communication with people on the Pro Tour, and maybe something happens, maybe something doesn't. I don't really know. Like, obviously what the dream would be to one day be on the live commentary. But I know that that's an uphill climb, because there's a lot of already talented people already in those seats. And there's only so many seats available. So, I kind of understand that, like, I'm kind of the bottom of the totem pole in that regard, because I'm the new guy. I don't have as much experience. I don't have the same tenure. But the ambition and drive and passion's still there, I can tell you that. So as far as what's next, I don't know. But certainly, hopefully something. Obviously, I have my own YouTube channel. I'll always put out my own personal content for fun. But hopefully, I can get involved in some Pro Tour stuff or whatever the case may be down the line. I'm always got an open ear for it.
Yeah, I don't know what the plan is for Silver Series next year, but you can always reach out to Ian Anderson from Central Coast and figure out what they're going to do, because they're covering all of the Silver Series next year on Central Coast's channel. So I know Ian, he's very workable. He's a nice guy. So reach out to Ian. Just at least put your name out there. Let him know you're interested. So I got something, actually, now that I think about it. I look over here. So every year, Skip Ace does a fundraiser for the Paul McBeth Foundation, and we do that at USDGC. Paul always, the past 2 years, has donated his players pack to the winner. Awesome plan. Someone wins and they get Paul McBeth's players pack with his, it's usually got some custom stuff. And what I get out of it is every year the Paul McBeth Foundation sends me some really awesome Paul McBeth signed exclusive, I think they're exclusive, I don't know, I just say that, discs signed by Paul McBeth. Like this one here is the Paul McBeth Foundation disc. This is a Zeus, I believe. I feel it feels like probably a Zeus. No, I'm sorry, it's a Luna.
That's a putter.
Yeah, putter, not a Zeus. The funny thing is, I was thinking Zeus, I was thinking Luna, but I said Zeus, and I'm like, no, Zeus is a driver. Like, what am I doing? It's his, because I'm thinking his putter. It's his Luna. And then here's another putter. This is a Luna as well. Yes. Okay. This one feels a little different though. It might just be the plastic.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, they got the same. Like, yeah, not a Zeus, a Luna. Wow, talk about old. But But anyway, this one says the project's 2023, so this is pretty cool. So if you do donate to a decent amount to the Paul McBeth Foundation, you can get on the list and get stuff. So by all means, if you're out there and you're looking to raise funds for something and you want a little something out of it, I don't expect these. Every year they surprise me because I forget about them. I get them at, like, I think I got one last February as well, and it just shows up and I'm always like, what did I get in the mail? Like, I didn't order discs, and I open them like, oh, that's right, it's the Paul McBeth stuff. Awesome. So those are some pretty sweet plastic. I'm always excited, hoping that maybe someday they'll be worth something, and I still won't sell them because I'll be like Terry Miller and I'll just hoard them. But
it does blow my mind how many discs that Terry Miller must have. Like,
it's got a lot. I mean, it's not so much. Obviously, it is a sheer number, but just the variety that he has too. Just because he always buys almost anything that comes out and just shovels a handful of them away. Or if they don't sell, he shovels a lot of them away. Like, there are discs that, didn't sell well 10 years ago that he just put, oh, look, I got 30 of these left. All right, I'm going to put them in a box and I'll put them in storage. And then suddenly 5 or 6 years later, everybody's clamoring for second run destroyers or something. And you're like, and Terry's like, oh, I got like 20 of them. He asked me today, he's like, how many of those, because the Paul McBeth discs went on sale, the Six Claw stuff. And he asked me, he's like, how many did you want of each? I'm like, oh, I want 3 of each. And he's like, okay, cool. I just want to make sure I have enough for selling, because he's going to turn around and sell some as well. Because he usually will, Terry gives me
I will say it seems
hookup.
like they made a lot of Six Claw stuff, so I kind of wonder.
It's not going to be as valuable.
There's no way,
No, not as valuable as the box full of 4 Claw stuff I have. But
like, we had a local store that doesn't even sell online get 300 of them.
Yeah, they were wide open.
That's just one example. Yeah, they were wide open, bro.
And that's kind of the spot I think we're in for collectible stuff. The stuff that they're releasing now, I don't feel will be as collectible as the stuff that was before, because everybody's expecting it to be collectible now. Terry and I took a chance when McBeth signed with Discraft that we went and got a bunch of the 4 Claw stuff, thinking like, hey, it's Paul's first run with Discraft, and nobody really thought much of it. Like, those zones weren't worth squat. You couldn't hardly give them away when they first flipped. The only thing that was worth anything was like the buzzes. And now those handful of zones that I have are going for, like, I think anywhere from like $120 to $200, depending on what you have with them. So, but you're right. Like the James Conrad Holy Shot disc, that's not worth anything. Nope. It's just cool to have.
Yeah.
And
exactly,
like the 6-time Claw stuff, unless you get one of the real exclusive ones that I know there's a few out there, they're just going to be stock discs practically.
Yeah, it's all about like a certain stamp variety or a certain color or something like that will like ultimately be like the one golden ticket that's actually worth a ton of money, but then like all the rest is going to be like, maybe you flip it and get like a $5 profit or something like that. Correct. Or $10 or something like that. Like, it's not going to be anything crazy. And that's actually been interesting to like see how disc golf has like adopted this drop culture, where it used to be, obviously for a while, like, supply was just low because of like production issues and things of that nature, and demand got crazy high because of COVID and all that jazz. But it is interesting, like, how, because like, I'm used to drop culture because of like things like sneakers or like other things that are like really highly sought after or collectible and like only a limited number get made, and so like you have that. But you would just never think that like disc, like a sport that's supposed to be like a relatively cheap entry point, cheap equipment, it's not viewed as like some like money, like high money thing like traditional golf or something like that, for example. Yet we have like this crazy collector's market for disc, and companies feed into it through these different like drops that they do. Like, Discmania might be like the worst for it, where it feels like everything they drop is limited. Like, you only ever
used to be
that
stock
come out. Like, now you're starting to see like they're like ramping up for like the stock S-Line release that they're about to have. But for a while there, like, every disc they dropped was like a limited player like thing, or like something. Like,
for a long time, I mean, Discmania was at the whim of Innova. Because Innova manufactured their stuff, so they only got a certain time, or however they had their agreement worked out on the machines. They could only get so many discs, and so I think the run was limited not necessarily by choice, but then you play into that. You know, if you know, if you only have apples to sell, you're making apple pie. And so now they have their own manufacturing area. They're going to be able to pump out discs at a much higher rate. And you're seeing how, I think, like the mystery boxes that they had this year, they might still be for sale, which is unheard of. Those Discmania mystery boxes used to go so fast. And this year I think they probably pumped out 1 billion of them, because it was like a couple weeks ago I saw that they were, I got an ad for them that Discmania was still trying to sell them. So they either made a whole crap ton or they weren't nearly as popular. And I'm guessing it was they made a whole crap ton thinking they were going to flip a whole bunch. And they probably did, but not as many as they thought.
Then it's like funny because Discraft kind of dips both directions, because like they do drop a lot of stock stuff, but then they have all that crazy like special Ledgestone stuff that like winds up being limited and has that whole collector's market aspect to it. So it's an interesting one.
That is interesting, because I think I heard that Ledgestone has truly has their own machine dedicated to them. Like I
wouldn't doubt it.
They pay for it. They pay for probably the employee that runs it and the stamping. I think like Ledgestone kind of has like they sublease a little area of the warehouse or something, and they have access to almost any mold that Discraft has ever made, and they can make all these crazy combinations, and they make all these exclusive drops, and it's worked out really well for them. They've been able to kind of milk that and be able to raise a ton of money for the Ledgestone Open and St. Jude and whatnot, because I wanted I wanted them to go back, and I was like, there's one disc that I want them to re-release. I want them to do the MRX, which is like it's pre-buzz mid-range, but apparently I think like the mold is broken. The original mold was broken back in the day, so they can't make them. And that's like, because it's the one disc that I asked, literally, I think I asked someone at Discraft, or I asked Terry to ask someone at Discraft. I was like, hey, can we get these? Because we were talking about trying to work with, I think, Ledgestone to make a run of them, like a Smashbox run of them, and have exclusive rights to them or something a couple of years ago. And it just didn't work out, because I think literally the mold that we wanted was broken. And they're like, nope, that's the one, like one of the 1 or 2 discs we can't recreate or remake with the original mold, but we have all these other ones. And Terry and I were like, they've all been done. Like, I don't need a Cyclone run. I don't need like an X-Clone run. I don't need any of these other ones. I wanted this particular one because I thought it would be kind of fun to have, an MR, an MRX in new plastic, as opposed to the older, God, I forget, it was ESP before it was ESP plastic. But yeah, so that was, some old behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, it's amazing that Ledgestone can kind of just continue to pump out. They're going to make their next drop in a couple weeks, I think. I think I saw that in like 2 weeks or something. They're going to make their first 2023 drop of plastic. So I'm curious to see what they make this year, because they always have some really kind of interesting molds.
I had to find a way to like flip the switch in my brain of not caring, because like it got to a point where it's like, if I don't flip the switch to not care mode, I'm literally going to go bankrupt buying a bunch of discs like every freaking time something drops. And so it's like, I had to eventually like draw a line in the sand, like, all right, like you can't have any more of my money. Like I have too many discs, and I feel like I have a lot of discs, but then I think of someone like Terry Miller, who has like, I wonder if anyone on this planet has more discs than Terry has.
Oh yeah, there's a few guys out there that are just crazy collectors that just collect a whole bunch of stuff. I mean,
Terry's got to be like top 10 though, or something like.
I don't know if he's top 10, but I think he's definitely top 5%. I'll say that. I don't know if he's top 10 in number of people, but
that's a given.
He is.
I would debate he's top 10,
because it's only like one. I mean, I don't say only one, but he's got an entire. Shed isn't the right word. Storage space, literally overflowing with discs. Plus, he's got some in his room of his house that he broadcasts from, and he's got some floating around with his outside sellers that he works with to sell at the parks. I mean, he's got a lot of stock stuff too. But I keep screaming at Terry, and I think he just keeps putting me off. I'm like, I want to take a winter, go to your storage facility, and just film what we call, rather than in the bag, just in the box. Pull a random box down, and let's go through it, whatever that mold is, and just tell us about it. Because he knows.
I think what blew my mind most about him,
he knows the story about all the discs. He could pull up and be like, "Oh yeah, these are the third run buzzes that came out at the Memorial in 2009. That there were only 500 made, and this one is whatever worth $150 last time I looked or something." And just go through a bin and make that one episode, 5-minute episodes, short little one. Someone's gonna steal my idea now because I put it out in the world, but just kind of go through these and just.
You're right.
And that's fine. There's only like 15 people in the world that could probably do this. So
what blew my mind the most is that he has like an online store, but like just never promotes it. Like I never seen it anywhere. I didn't even know he had it. And then I think by chance he just happened to mention it like one random episode, and I was like, oh crap, he has an online store. And so I went and found it.
Yeah, he hasn't done anything with it for years. And finally,
I ordered some stuff off of it like a while back. I'm not going to lie. Like not too long ago, actually. Like a few months ago, I ordered some stuff off of it.
And it's been only in the last like 3 to 4 months he's been really working on not promoting it, but getting it up to date. Because again, Terry travels so much and he's
sure
only has so much time, so he's never really wanted to put much effort into it. So when he sells discs, it's usually, hey, I'm going to do a raffle, or I'm going to go on eBay or whatever. I'm going to put stuff out there. But otherwise he sells discs locally. And so now he's got some people that he's working with that are like excited to do online sales and stuff like that. So he's slowly building up his repertoire. And again, that's the other thing I keep telling him, like, you need to go through your collectible stuff and value it, and maybe not get rid of all of it. But if you have 20, or we'll just say 40 first run destroyers that are each going for $200 a piece, you could sell 10 of them. Like,
yeah.
But he can't. That's just it, though. And I'd say this to Terry if he was here. He can't. I think it physically hurts him. Like,
to let one of those things go.
He's stuck in like a funny mentality of, I could sell it now.
He's like halfway to hoarding. He's halfway there.
He's close to it. I think he just is not worried isn't the right word, but just he doesn't need to. So there's always
that's a good point.
And
it's not like he's dying for the money or something.
Correct.
Like
he doesn't need the cash.
Exactly.
He could use it, whatever. But there's the idea of, I could sell this destroyer now for $200, or I could hold on to it for another 2 to 5 years, and maybe it's $250, maybe it's $300, and I keep telling him maybe it's $100.
Yeah.
There are certain discs that we've seen come and get really excited, like the USDGC rocks, and then they lose all their value.
Mm-hmm.
All it's going to take is, and I know it's difficult because I don't foresee this, Innova to release a new driver that everybody falls in love with, and suddenly the destroyer is old hat or something along those lines. Somehow Discraft comes out with the next awesome mid-range, and the buzz isn't all that anymore. But again, that would be very difficult to do because there are certain discs that are just beloved,
right?
And so
it does seem like there are certain molds that are untouchable for sure.
And that's kind of how it feels. Like the rock, the destroyer, the buzz, the AVR. I think those are kind of like the untouchable discs in our sport that probably won't go anywhere.
Every company has like a handful for sure.
No,
that will always be around. Really?
No. I don't think. I mean, I throw a lot of DD stuff, but I don't see them having a disc that would anybody would care about if it went away. Like that, a huge majority of people that would be like, oh, you can't get rid of this.
At DD,
or just
think if there's one.
Or hardly Discmania. Like,
oh, I would disagree.
Discmania kind of has the DD3,
the DD3, the PD.
The DD3 is a destroyer clone.
The PD2,
like, people like them, but
MD1, like there's a few molds I think at Discmania that people will be upset at.
I will say this: DD, I take it back. DD does have a few. They've got the EMAC Truth.
Yeah, that's the big one.
And the Judge. I think those two, you don't like. Those are almost untouchable at DD. Right. So I take that back.
And Latitude's probably like the Ballista Pro or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
MVP, the
Vault, probably.
No.
The Envy.
Envy. Thank you. The Envy.
That's Axiom technically, but yeah.
Technically, it's Axiom. Yeah. There's that. So, but for the most part, I think about Discraft discs. I'm like,
The buzz for sure.
The buzz is really the only one I can think of that's really like people would just lose it if for some reason they stop producing them. Like,
yeah, that's got to be the main one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of good discs. They got the Force, and they've got that a lot of their players use, and now they've got the whole Paul Macbeth line. And I love the Comet personally. I think everybody should throw one, but I just think it's a good disc to really nail down your form with because it shows off every flaw. Like if you have a flaw in your throw, the Comet will prove it. And if you can throw a Comet really well, you can probably throw almost any disc really well. So that's kind of how I feel about it. It's not you don't see a lot of players other than Michael Joe throwing them on tour, but I feel it's a really good, it's a really showcase disc. It's very finicky. So
that's fair. Agree with that.
Yeah. All right, Dust, I think we've run the gamut tonight. What is it? It's almost midnight here in the Midwest.
We've had about a 3-hour show, roughly.
Yeah, that's about right. That's
pretty solid.
That's our solid normal show. It'll get somebody, to their next rest stop, hopefully, this weekend, which is what we shoot for here at Smashbox. But I want to thank you again for joining us and talking
I appreciate it, man.
disc golf and talking esports as well. I know that you probably sometimes get sick of talking esports and you want to talk disc golf, but a lot of us get sick of talking disc golf and want to talk esports. So
it's just hard talking esports. Like it's like esports for me, like not to keep the thing going for too long.
No, that's
but
fine.
The one thing about esports that's funny is I have to decide how much time I want to commit to talking about it before I even mention it. So the perfect example will be if I'm on an airplane and the person sitting next to me turns around and is like, "What do you do for a living?" It's like, how long do I want this conversation to be?
Yeah.
Because if I say I'm an esports commentator and then I just don't say anything else, they'll be like, "What in the world is esports?" And then all of a sudden I'm invested now. This is a 30-minute conversation bare minimum.
Yeah.
Or I have to just be like, "Oh, I'm a journalist." Or just some general thing that's
Sure.
vaguely related to what I actually do, but will get me out of having a 30-minute conversation about it. So that's the funny thing about esports is most people are just have no clue that I run into in everyday life, and it's just how long do I want to have this conversation for? Or how much time do you have? Because I'm down, but we're gonna have to get through some stuff for this to make sense. And so that's what always gets interesting with people.
I feel you because I feel the same way. When people ask me what I do, the easy thing for me, if I want to shut people up, it's I work in IT.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's how and it's true. I do. That's my 9 to 5. But when people find out that I do a podcast, then there's all the questions. Well, what's it about? How often do you do it? Is it, where can I watch it? Let me subscribe to it right now. And half the time I just feel it's you really don't want to. I talked to some of my friends or my kids' parents, my kids' friends' parents, and they come in, they hang out at the house, and they come downstairs and they'll see the podcast too. Oh wow, this is nice, and tell me, I'll sit and listen. I'm like, no, you won't. You'll get into 5 minutes of it and you'll get bored because you don't care about disc golf. I could sit and even my best friends who I had over 2 weekends ago from high school sat down, and some of them I've known for 30 years, and they still don't really fully understand. It's like, so tell me about disc golf. What are you doing? It's all right, I kind of explain it every few years, but I do live broadcasting, and then you have to get into the entire disc golf pro tour and my aspect of it and the podcast. Yep. And then they're like, well, do you, would it interest me? And I'm like, no, it wouldn't. Would I sit and then the question is, well, what do you talk about for 3 hours every week? Yeah, every week.
Mm-hmm. I feel you, man.
And you're, again, you tell them you're not going to find this interesting. Sometimes
I struggle to answer the question. Even if I'm willing to have the conversation, especially because I do it as a freelancer, it's not really a career, so to speak. It makes it even harder to say that because I don't even feel confident in myself saying that this is my job because it might not be tomorrow. You know what I mean? Because that's just the nature of the risk of being a freelancer, working gig to gig and lining up contracts, stuff like that. It's always hard to just identify yourself as something like that. That is that sort of thing. And unless you have a cushy full-time role in that particular thing. But then, like you said, it gets into the minutia of actually trying to explain what the heck you do and the details, and they start asking questions. You're like, you're not gonna understand, and it's even harder for me because, like, even though we're almost hitting the point where, like, esports has been around long enough and it's mainstream enough, and like most people my age and younger know about it,
Yeah.
that it's not so hard. But like crossing over like into disc golf, for example, like the demographic of disc golf like still probably trends a bit older than like a lot of other communities, like
sure.
just like and so that is still like the one that's tough for me to like break through on, and to like be like, what the heck is that? Like I would see it all the time in like gatekeeper comments, like, what the heck's esports? Like, you know, it's just like that the demographic is a little bit tougher there. But
I talk about people playing video games.
And that even sets them even further apart, man.
Yeah.
Then you start telling about people who live stream on Twitch and they make a bunch of money just people watching them play a video game. Like that's where it gets real wild, right?
Yeah.
But I think, like, you know, another generation away from that not being such a mystery to people anymore.
Yeah, I think it's going to take like one big, and I thought maybe Fortnite would do it, but like one big tournament to be broadcast on like NBC on a Saturday night or something. And I know there's been a few that have hit like broadcast. Usually I've always seen them like on if they were on, they were usually on like afternoon, like, hey, it's a Saturday afternoon thing. But, you know, a prime time big event for a huge game that everybody is kind of in the know of. And I kind of thought that Fortnite was going to do that with as huge of a surge that it had. And I kind of feel like that's even Fortnite is like on the downswing currently, and I judge that based on, you know, what my kids are interested in.
Well, that whole genre of game is on the downswing.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of a battle royale game has become like
Yes.
pretty stale as a genre in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think you're right, and I do think mobile gaming is actually helped in that regard, though, because I think like a lot of people do wind up eventually at some point getting some kind of game on their phone, no matter how old they are, and then that's kind of bridged the gap as well a little bit. But interesting stuff for sure.
Definitely. Well, Dust, thanks for joining us again.
Absolutely.
It is now officially 12:02. Well, we're going to wrap up the show once again. Thanks to everybody who sat and listened to us talk. This was podcast after show episode 441. And as Terry said, thanks again for stepping inside the Smashbox.